cheating wife's devious plot to eliminate me for wealth backfires as I uncover her scheme. Why do the wicked thrive while the honest suffer? It's because most people are generally decent and truthful. We trust others to act the same, leaving us vulnerable to those who deceive without remorse. Gina Giannopoulos, now Gina Giannopoulos McMillan, showed me this hard truth. I'm Alex McMillan, her ex-husband. One day my Lexus had engine trouble. Dominic, who serviced my cars for a decade, called me in for a talk, leading me to a private office at Marshall Motors. "Alex, the engine's fine, just the belt's loose, but there's a problem with the brake line," Dominic said gravely. "It's been tampered with. There's enough fluid for normal stops, but if you needed to brake hard or go down a steep hill, it could have been disastrous." I was stunned. 6 months ago, Gina and I moved into a sleek new house in the suburbs, nestled in quiet woods, but at the bottom of a steep cul-de-sac. If I had driven home, it could have been fatal. "Dominic, keep quiet about this for now. Have you fixed it?" "Not yet." "This is serious. I need to call the police," he replied. "Hold off," I suggested. "Take a photo, document everything, but let's wait. Leave the car in the backyard, and I'll rent one of your old cars for a few days. There are security cameras, right?" Dominic hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, there are. Whoever's behind this will likely try to cover their tracks once they realize I'm alive. I suspect they'll attempt to steal the car from the parking lot soon, so I'm holding off on involving the police until then. Meanwhile, we'll have camera footage to provide them." After leaving the rented blue Corolla in my driveway, I took the day off to contemplate the attempt on my life, likely motivated by money. As president of Apex, a $6.8 billion software company, I suspected it was part of an attack on the company. With Carmelita, our cook and housekeeper, away for the day and the house quiet, I pondered potential culprits and motives. Calling Jeff, head of the security firm Apex employs, I arranged for a discreet audit of our systems and financial records. I provided Jeff with a temporary password for access and instructed my secretary Meredith to facilitate their visit. With preparations in motion, I continued my investigation. Though I didn't expect to find anything significant on our home computer, just out of curiosity, I attempted to access Gina's files, including her email, only to find them password protected. It struck me as odd. What could she be hiding, unless it was something innocent like planning a surprise party? I resolved to inquire about it later. Around 4:30, as I sipped tea in the kitchen, Gina entered and was visibly shocked by my presence. Her reaction was unlike anything I'd seen before. Her mouth dropped, she turned pale, and she leaned heavily against the doorframe. "Alex, why are you here?" Gina asked, startled. I gently reminded her that I lived there. She composed herself and joined me at the table, mentioning my early arrival and the absence of my car outside. In an instant, I considered telling her about the brake line, but settled for mentioning an engine issue and leaving the car at Dominic's. I rented one of their cars, explaining the vehicle in the driveway. Initially, I hesitated to tell her the truth, thinking I didn't want to worry her, but upon reflection, I realized it was more than that. Her shock in seeing me puzzled me deeply, lingering in my thoughts. Gina recovered, suggesting dinner plans and excusing herself to shower. As I heard the water running, I decided to tidy up and change before our evening out. As I approached the almost closed bedroom door, I overheard Gina speaking urgently on the phone. Why would she call while showering? Her conversation, though brief, made me pause. She was talking to Jeff Denham, my security-savvy friend known as Dowell since 8th grade. Gina had picked up my nickname for him, confirming his identity. After she hung up and headed to the bathroom, I waited, pondering the implications. Was there a connection between Gina, Jeff, and the car incident? Despite the whirlwind of thoughts, it all seemed improbable. Gina and I were married for 8 years. I was 46, she was 37, having been married once before at 20, with 2 kids living far away. I first encountered Gina during her tour of Apex offices. Intrigued, I orchestrated a lunch date through a mutual friend, which proved successful. Gina exuded effortless beauty, standing nearly 6 feet tall, with raven black hair, dark eyes, and a confident demeanor. Despite my age and average looks, I knew my success played a part in her attraction, and I was fine with that. With a solid prenup in place ensuring fairness in case of divorce, I believed our love was genuine and our life together promising. Gina brought me joy, despite her extravagant spending habits and flirtatious nature. Though she was adventurous in bed and in life, recent events had cast doubt on our relationship, especially with my friend Dowell possibly involved. I discreetly investigated Apex's finances, withholding information about the car break-in from both Gina and Dowell. That evening at dinner with Gina, I concealed my anxiety, knowing our night would end calmly. The next morning, I woke early and swiftly prepared for a trip to Los Angeles. With a packed bag, flight booked, and limo arranged, I woke Gina to inform her of my sudden departure. "Sorry to wake you, babe," I said, smiling at her as she slowly opened her eyes and returned the smile. "Morning, Alex. What's up?" I explained that I needed to fly to LA for a sudden business meeting, though it was a fabrication, a believable one, given my frequent travel. "All right, honey. I'll keep the bed warm. Back by Friday?" she asked. "Yeah, that's the plan. Just you and me," I replied. She chuckled and hugged me tightly, reassuring me of her presence. As I rode in the limo, I pondered Gina's possible involvement in the car incident. Her ease with deception made me question whether she was innocent or a skilled liar. I hoped for the former but feared the latter. During the short flight to Los Angeles, I strategized my plan, prioritizing secrecy due to Jeff Denham's potential involvement. As the top security expert locally, I decided to bring in someone from outside the area. After landing, I bought a prepaid cell phone for anonymity and checked into the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. I then arranged to meet Dan Cameron, my former right-hand man, for lunch near his downtown office. Despite living in LA now, Dan and I maintained our friendship, meeting a few times a year. Over lunch, we caught up on old times and discussed recent events. When the conversation turned serious, I leaned in to discuss matters further. "I need a couple of favors, Dan," I began, and seeing his interest, I explained. "I suspect issues within Apex. Do you trust any security firms?" "Certainly. Vertex Securities. Alan Newman leads it," Dan replied. "But what about Jeff Denham?" he added. "I need an outside perspective," I explained. "First, call Newman, but don't mention my name." Dan promptly made the call, arranging a meeting with Newman. Grateful, I asked him to keep our conversation confidential. Then I asked a more personal question. "Have you ever seen Gina act suspiciously?" To my surprise, Dan hesitated, his face flushing. Eventually, he confessed, recounting Gina's flirtations with him before he moved away. He was reluctant to disclose, fearing disbelief or anger from me. Dan sat down briefly, wearing a troubled expression. "I get it, Dan, and I'm not upset with you," I reassured him. "You chose to ignore the subtle advances and eventually she stopped." "Exactly, it lasted a few weeks, then she went back to her usual self," Dan explained, adding, "It felt like she was testing me or something." "Was there anything else? Any other odd behavior?" I asked, to which Dan nodded, still looking uneasy. "Actually, yes. When we moved, Linda learned from Barbara Daniels, Josh's wife, that Josh, our CFO, was likely cheating with Gina. Intrigued, I inquired further, "How did Barbara find out?" Dan admitted uncertainty, mentioning Josh's suspicious behavior and potential encounters with Gina's perfume. He revealed that he and Linda debated whether to inform me, ultimately deciding against it to avoid unnecessary conflict. After our conversation, I harbored no resentment towards Dan. His accounts reinforced the suspicion that Gina might be involved in a scheme against me and my company. My call with Alan Newman was brief and to the point. I explained my need for a top-tier security firm for a confidential matter, emphasizing my desire for someone not affiliated with me or my acquaintances. Newman recommended Barry Asimov in San Diego, praising his intelligence, team, and trustworthiness. At my request, Newman connected me with Asimov and arranged a meeting for the following morning at 10 a.m. without disclosing my identity. Back at the hotel, I called Dan Cameron and asked him to rent a car from Hertz, ensuring it wouldn't be traceable. After a quick dinner, I had my usual late-night chat with Gina before heading to bed. The next morning, disguised in sweatpants, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, I traveled to the Hertz office at the Los Angeles airport. By 9:45, I arrived in San Diego and parked near the Asimov office. Despite Asimov's unimpressive appearance, I quickly realized his intelligence surpassed expectations. Feeling the need to confide, I directly addressed Asimov. "I require a top-notch security firm for a highly confidential and complex task," I explained. "This assignment involves extensive high-tech computer work and demands absolute discretion. I'm prepared to compensate generously, covering all expenses. The project may span weeks, and your fee could reach 7 figures. He gazed at me intently for a moment. "Why come to us? What makes you think we're capable?" "Alan Newman recommended you highly," I replied. "Why not use Newman then?" he questioned. "He's excellent, but I need to cover my tracks. Once we unravel this, you'll understand. I have to be cautious. Newman contacted you without divulging my identity, making it challenging to trace back." After discussing initial arrangements, Asimov prompted, "Tell me the whole story. If it aligns with our capabilities, we're on board." I divulged everything: my identity, Apex's operations and worth, and the recent assassination attempt, suspecting involvement from Gina and Dan. I recounted Dan Cameron's observations without mentioning his name. Asimov posed clarifying questions, displaying his expertise. "I'm familiar with Jeff Denham's reputation," he acknowledged. "If he's involved, we'll tread carefully." After further discussion, Asimov outlined a plan. "You need two things: detailed examination of your documents and investigation into Denham, your wife, and other Apex executives. David Carlos, my top computer expert, will handle the financial scrutiny. Vera Anderson will lead a surveillance team for the other aspect." Half an hour later, we gathered in a conference room, enjoying takeout sandwiches while discussing my predicament. Asimov took a back seat, allowing Carlos and Anderson to lead the discussion, occasionally chiming in with his insights. His sharp wit reassured me, and by mid-afternoon I headed back to Los Angeles, relieved that Asimov accepted a promissory note instead of an immediate large fee. Carlos planned to investigate Apex through my computer, which linked to the company's vital systems. He instructed me to memorize Asimov's website URL. When alone in my office for over 2 hours, I would visit the site, download a program enabling Carlos to access and copy files from my computer and its network. Upon leaving, I'd delete the program and clear my browser history, covering my tracks. Though not foolproof, this method would likely go unnoticed unless my computer came under intense scrutiny. Carlos estimated that within 20 hours of web searching, he'd acquire the necessary data to assess Apex's status. Anderson's task was routine surveillance of Gina and Apex's top brass. We agreed against monitoring Denham, aware his security background would likely detect any surveillance, opting instead for discreet phone and credit card investigations. I cautioned against underestimating Denham's vigilance. He'd swiftly detect any overt surveillance. Vera proposed house audio-video recording bugs, Gina's purse and phone tap, ensuring secrecy. They assured quick, covert execution within 3 hours, including a sweep for existing surveillance. As for Gina's personal phone, Vera pledged to handle it at her tennis club locker. My role was to maintain normalcy, unsuspecting at work and home. While Asimov predicted a delay before another attempt on me, he advised caution, suggesting avoiding isolated areas and driving solo, even having Gina drive to work. I promised vigilance, despite the seeming ease of his advice. Before parting ways, we devised a one-way communication method to reach Asimov. Utilizing discarded cell phones, I'd call Larry Asimov, with the receptionist redirecting me to Barry. We agreed on bi-daily check-ins. Returning to the Beverly Wilshire, I informed Gina of my early return. She expressed her loneliness and anticipation for our reunion on Thursday night. Ending the call, I reflected on Gina's alleged plot. Despite her self-centered nature, I believe she loved me in her own manner. Our marriage lacked typical displays of affection, but we found contentment in our shared ambitions. Gina, although unemployed, remained active in her interests. Despite this, the evidence hinted at her involvement in the attempted homicide, driven by greed, a notion that unsettled me. If Dan Cameron's revelations were accurate, Gina might have ties to both Josh Daniels from Apex and my friend Jeff Denham. In essence, if my fears were valid, she embodied a monstrous, heartless figure. If she indeed had relations with Daniels, pursued Dan Cameron, and had links to Denham, it implied her central role in the ordeal. During the flight to San Jose, I pondered the possible outcomes. I believed I could convincingly feign ignorance around Gina for a time, should she be deceiving me. Conversely, if my doubts were unfounded, I'd gladly welcome her love once more. However, if she were implicated in the attempt on my life, I had envisioned how I wanted the situation to unfold, and a part of me anticipated it. Our Thursday night reunion with Gina was notable for a few reasons. Firstly, the closeness was exceptional. Secondly, the evening was ordinary, devoid of any conspicuous behavior that hinted at guilt or apprehension on her part. She conversed as usual, discussing her tennis match and shopping ventures, showing no indication of my suspicions. Upon my arrival at the office on Friday, Denham had already phoned to announce his imminent visit. His eagerness was unsurprising. Likely he aimed to discuss the audit I'd requested and probe into my motivations. As he entered with a grin, extending a handshake, I pondered how he'd learned of my trip to LA. Perhaps Gina had mentioned it, though I refrained from raising suspicions by inquiring. Instead, I greeted him warmly, mentioning my time in LA and the uncertain outcome of a lead from Dan Cameron. Denham settled in across from me, reporting the audit's findings as routine, with minor accounting errors. He probed into my reason for the audit, his tone attempting nonchalance. Thankfully, I had anticipated the situation and had a prepared excuse. I initially dismissed it as nothing, but on Monday, Bert Williamson from 2K2 reached out. Apparently, One of their vice presidents heard vague rumors at a New York meeting about an attack on a Silicon Valley software firm involving fake subsidiaries funneling money. It sounded dubious, but since it had been a while since I requested an account check, I figured it was worth investigating. Apologies for the inconvenience, but it's better to stay informed. He seemed to relax, responding, "No problem, buddy. That's what we're here for." After his departure, I swiftly initiated Carlos's software to scrutinize Apex's finances and communications. Wanting to afford them ample time, I opted to dine at my desk, with Meredith kindly fetching lunch along with the day's newspaper, which I hadn't had a chance to read. Midway through my meal, an article on the Metro page caught my eye. Auto shop fire destroys 12 cars. Reading it closely, I learned that a blaze had erupted at Marshall Motors, consuming 12 vehicles and damaging several others. While not entirely unexpected given the circumstances, it still rattled me. I immediately phoned Dominic, wary of potential eavesdropping, and inquired about the incident. He assured me that everything was fine, but unfortunately confirmed my suspicions about my Lexus, which had been completely destroyed in the fire. "It's all right, Dominic. That's what insurance is there for. Can I swing by after work today, say around 6 p.m.? We agreed on the time, ending the call. While I doubted the security tapes at Marshall Motors had captured anything suspicious, I intended to have Asimov's team review them, just to be thorough. Thankfully, Dominic had documented the brake line issue and snapped some photos. Whoever orchestrated the arson was skilled. Walking me through the scene as the authorities gathered evidence, Dominic noted they suspect foul play but doubt they can prove it. "Seems like that old Ford truck next to. Your Lexus had a gas leak, igniting a chain reaction. The blast engulfed the other cars," he said. Gesturing toward the wreckage, he added, "There were surveillance cameras nearby, and I've copied the footage for you. It's in my office, tucked away with the coffee filters." "Thank you, Dom. Now I need another favor, a significant one." I requested that Dominic hold off until Monday before sending the surveillance footage and his initial report, including photos, to Barry Asimov's office. I repeated the address several times to ensure he remembered. I also left my rental car with Dominic, opting for cabs for the next few days, picking them up from different locations on a whim. It reduces the likelihood of falling into a trap. I quickly dialed Larry and reached Barry Asimov within minutes. Not much had changed. Carlos had extracted data from my computer, but the process wasn't complete yet. I assured Barry I'd try to make it to the office during the weekend. Vera Anderson's team swept my house for bugs, finding none, and installed their own. They also cracked Gina's computer password and copied her files, planning to examine them later. I briefed Barry on the car fire incident, promising to provide documents and reports soon. We scheduled another call for early the following week. The weekend passed uneventfully. Gina and I stuck to our usual routine, sleeping in on Saturday, followed by breakfast cooked by Gina. We spent the day at the clubhouse, with me playing golf and Gina relaxing by the pool with her friends. Dinner was at the club with friends, followed by more love-making moments at home. Sunday saw us pursuing our individual activities. I informed Gina that I had to spend part of the day at the office, a common occurrence. I requested a ride and headed to the club for tennis. Using my discarded cell phone, I alerted Barry, who assured me Vera would meet her operative in the locker room while Gina played. I logged in, initiated the program, and let Carlos proceed. I pondered why I wasn't consumed by anger, considering the apparent betrayal by my wife and best friend, Gina's flirtation with Josh Daniels and possibly others. Despite these revelations, my anger remained subdued. I recalled the saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold," attributed to Pierre-Ambroise François Chauderlos de Laclos in the 18th century. I compartmentalized my emotions, reserving judgment until I had concrete evidence. Gina picked me up around 5:30 after her activities, and we shared a quiet dinner at home, opting to watch recorded episodes of The Sopranos before retiring for the night. Monday passed without incident. In my office, I feigned work, ensuring David Carlos could complete the software setup. But during a Tuesday afternoon call with Barry from a downtown bar booth, I learned of significant progress from his team. "Firstly, your car was indeed arson," Barry began. "Two masked men punctured the Ford's gas tank, spreading gasoline around before igniting it." I inquired about Dominic's evidence, suggesting it could implicate the perpetrators. Barry agreed, but noted the challenge of linking it to Denham or my wife without further proof. Moving on, Barry disclosed David's findings on my computer. They suspect a year-long embezzlement scheme totaling around $2 million. David believes he can trace it back to a specific office computer with more time. Concerned about recovering the funds, I asked about the possibility of reimbursement, to which Barry expressed skepticism, advising recourse through legal action if the culprit can be identified. Despite the financial loss being significant, I found solace in it being less severe than attempted homicide. Any updates on Gina? Did Vera's team find the bugs and access her computer files? He cleared his throat. Things aren't looking good, Alex. I won't sugarcoat it. It seems she's likely tied to two of the three Apex guys you mentioned, Josh Daniels and Eddie Kryler. Also, on Sunday, she made a call to Denham from her cell phone, confirming their relationship. Jesus, I muttered, feeling the weight of the revelation sink in. Barry's voice broke my somber thoughts. Give us a couple more days to sort this out. Vera's team is tracking Gina's cell phone, purse bug, and the bugs in your house. They're also investigating her cell phone records and credit cards. Did you have any idea about the cards under her maiden name? Hell no, I replied, still stunned. I understand this is tough. Can you hang tight a little longer while we conclude our investigation? I know I have to, Barry, so I'll manage. Do you think there's a risk of another attack? After a brief pause, he said, Possibly, but they'll be cautious, given the recent car incident. If you take reasonable precautions, avoid secluded places, you should be safe. Should I assign some men to watch over you? No, it's too risky. Denham's associates might catch on. I'll look after myself. I'll check in on Thursday. I'm sorry, Alex, he said softly. Yeah, me too, I replied before hanging up. Wednesday marked one of the most dismal days of my adult life. I faced the grim reality of my failing marriage and the betrayal of my closest friend, harboring the unsettling knowledge that one or both of them sought my downfall. Stuck in the office, I feigned productivity, engaging in sporadic conversations with Meredith while my mind churned with thoughts of vengeance. Though the specifics hinged on Barry's findings, the broad strokes of my retaliatory plan were already etched in my mind, fueling a growing sense of indignation and anticipation. Come Thursday, I delayed my call to Asimov, allowing his team ample time for investigation. By 4 p.m., I opted for a haircut and then retreated to a diner, hunkering down with a cup of coffee to dial Barry. Our conversation stretched nearly an hour, peppered with queries, clarifications, and strategizing. With the call concluded, he wished me luck, and we bid farewell. Armed with newfound information, I resolved to press forward. That evening, I maintained my facade at home, reciprocating Gina's affection as usual. Over a dinner of Carmelita's fried chicken and a movie, I contemplated the imminent end of our physical closeness, perhaps even our emotional connection altogether. Wanting to avoid Gina, I left early on Friday and grabbed a quick breakfast, opting for Gina's BMW convertible on the way to the office. I aimed for a safer commute today, though Gina would likely be annoyed by the disappearance of her car. By day's end, it would be the least of her concerns. Upon Meredith's arrival at 9, I summoned her to my office, presenting her with a list of tasks. I'll need to adjust my schedule today, I informed her. Could you handle setting this up for me? Perusing the list, her eyes widened in surprise. Expecting an explanation, she received only silence from me. Nevertheless, she nodded and pledged to take care of it. With a smile, I watched her exit. My morning remained uneventful, except for a 10 meeting with Nancy Lyatt, a friend and principal at Lyatt & Hine, a long-standing PR firm for Apex. Nancy, an attractive and witty woman around my age, engaged in an hour-long discussion in my office, with the radio masking our conversation. At lunchtime, I enjoyed a sandwich and soda at my desk, preparing for the anticipated events of the afternoon. Around 1, Meredith informed me that Jeff Denham was trying to reach me urgently. I instructed her to inform him that I couldn't meet until 4, as previously arranged. I pondered whether Denham had bugged my office, considering the possibility that he might have overheard my conversation with Nancy Lyatt. Nonetheless, I relished the idea of his frustration. Entering the conference room a few minutes before 1, I found it arranged precisely as I had specified, with the necessary equipment set up and ready to go. Hello, I greeted. It's Arthur, right? He grinned, acknowledging the recognition. Yes, Mr. McMillan. Arthur Wren. Everything set up. Shall I run it or just give you a demo?
Just show me, please, Arthur.
I want it running all day for my meetings here. He positioned it to cover the designated area, and we tested it briefly. All was well. The cartridge lasts 6 hours, so you're good to go, Mr. McMillan. After thanking Arthur, I adjusted my laptop and reclined. Moments later, Josh Daniels entered, looking hesitant. Josh, come in. You're fine with recording this, right? He seemed puzzled. Alex, what's up? We'll discuss in a sec. Did Meredith explain? This stays between us, okay? He nodded, still uneasy. Yeah, sure, Alex. Is everything all right with the filming? I suppose, but I cut him off. Wait, Josh, you'll understand soon. I leaned back, maintaining a neutral expression, observing his discomfort. Then I confronted him. Josh, I know about you and my wife. He grew tense, struggling to appear composed. His gaze avoided mine. "Alex, I don't know what. No need to pretend. I have the evidence," I confidently delivered the lie, tapping the thick manila folder beside me. "But now I want the truth from you. You're in deep trouble and lying will only make it worse." I faced tough negotiations, but Josh appeared utterly miserable. I relished his discomfort, waiting for his attempt to evade what he'd done. After a pause, he spoke. "Alex, can we turn the camera off?" "No, keep going, Josh, I'm listening. When did it start?" "How? And how could you justify this affair with the boss's wife?" He kept his gaze down. "It began 4 years ago, lasted 3 months. Gina seduced me, it's that simple. Linda and I knew you both for years." Gina flirted. Who wouldn't? Then, at a Christmas party, she heavily flirted with me. I didn't believe it until she called me, asking to come over when you were away. I tried to leave, but she insisted, locked the door, and confessed her desires. I knew it was wrong, but I stayed. She led me to the bedroom, and we spent 2 hours together. Josh slumped in defeat, his head resting on his hands as he gazed at the floor. "How long did it last, and how did it end?" "That's how it went. Then one day she abruptly ended it, not even being particularly kind. I think it was because I refused to comply with her wishes." "What did she want?" I inquired, breaking my silence since the confession began. He met my gaze. "She wanted me to set up fake accounts to drain money from Apex. It was all about the money, Alex, nothing else. She believed you had millions, and she wanted a big share for herself. She'd ask me questions in bed about our accounting systems, if creating fake accounts was possible, the risks involved, and so on. At first, I thought she was joking, but she kept bringing it up. In the end, I told her I wouldn't do it." He sat up straight. "I won't lie anymore, Alex. I didn't refuse out of morals or loyalty to you or Apex. By then, I was willing to do anything just to be with Gina. But I couldn't see a way to do what she wanted without risking getting caught, and I wasn't willing to go to jail, not even for her. When Gina realized I wouldn't comply, she ended things. Fortunately, it happened before Linda could find proof of the affair. I repeatedly denied it, fabricating stories and swearing it was just work-related projects. Although Linda probably didn't fully believe me, she eventually dropped it. I made every effort to make it up to her, and thankfully, we're still together." We sat silently for a few minutes. Much of what Josh disclosed was new to me. Barry's team had uncovered evidence of the affair, numerous phone calls, and some suggestive emails. But Josh's revelation, that Gina initiated it, and her desire to embezzle from the company were surprises. I rose and dismissed Josh, instructing him to leave for the weekend and keep our discussion confidential. He responded with resignation and fear, agreeing to reconvene on Monday and return home to his family. In the meantime, I spoke with Eddie Kryler around 1:30 p.m. Eddie advanced within Apex, holding positions in global sales and marketing before becoming my second in command in operations. He confirmed Gina approached him several months post her split with Josh, a period exceeding 6 months. Being single, they didn't feel the need for extreme caution. Eddie revealed Gina broached the idea of embezzling from the company gradually, initially as a joke. Over time, it evolved into a serious proposition. He explored various options but found none feasible, citing the company's stringent financial controls. When he confessed his reluctance to Gina, their association ended. When I confronted Bernard Eisenhart, Apex's treasurer, about his involvement with my wife, his reaction was one of surprise rather than distress. He insisted I should discuss it with Gina, not him. Despite presenting him with pictures, he remained firm in his denial. Barry confirmed there was no evidence linking him to Gina except for one phone call. Bernie recounted how Gina lured him to a supposed surprise party where she made advances. However, he resisted due to my marital status and left promptly afterward. He opted not to disclose this incident to me earlier, fearing I would blame him. Understanding his perspective, I assured him I believed his account, clarifying that I recently discovered Gina's infidelity with other company employees. Bernie's initial anger subsided into astonishment upon learning about Gina's involvement with 2 other men. He even recalled rumors about her and Josh from years ago but had dismissed them. After our discussion, I assured him of my trust, reiterated that I hadn't accused him, and stressed the importance of confidentiality. After he left, Meredith informed me about Jeff Denham's urgency to meet immediately, despite the scheduled appointment for 4. Denham was insistent. I instructed Meredith to give me 5 minutes before letting him in. Reflecting on what I had just learned, I realized the gravity of the situation. Discovering that my best friend wanted me dead was not an everyday occurrence, and I relished the opportunity to confront him. When Jeff Denham entered the conference room, he appeared visibly shaken, as though he had consumed an excess of caffeine. Despite his attempt to appear composed, his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Hey, Alex, what's up?" His tone, though carefully casual, carried a hint of anxiety. "Hey, Dowell, thanks for dropping by. Want some coffee?" He declined and inquired about the video camera in the room. With a smile, I explained its purpose for recording today's meetings. He seemed apprehensive but voiced no objections. As Denham puzzled over the situation, I noted Meredith's silence and Bernie Eisenhardt's cryptic nod earlier. Turning the laptop toward Denham, I revealed a still frame from a recent bedroom video. His shock was palpable as he met my gaze. Before he could respond, I struck him with my fist under his eye. He recoiled, crashing to the floor as the chair slid backward. Standing over him, I removed my glove, feeling the pain but relieved it wasn't more severe. With a grim smile, I waited for Denham to regain his composure. It took him a while to regain consciousness, and when he did, he looked around warily, then moved away from me, his expression a mix of confusion and caution. "Think you can handle more?" I quipped, my tone casual. "No need, Alex," he muttered, eyeing the door as if considering escape. "Forget it, Dowell. Guards are outside. You're staying put," I assured him. As we sat in tense silence, he seemed to mull over his predicament, likely hoping I was unaware of the full extent of his actions. "Get back to the table," I commanded. "What's coming next will hurt a lot worse." He complied, keeping his gaze fixed on me. "You're a disgrace," I berated him. "Entertaining my wife, stealing from me, and plotting my homicide." His reaction was one of shock and alarm. "Gina confessed it all," I lied confidently. "You thought eliminating me would complete the betrayal, didn't you?" "Alex, it's not true," he pleaded desperately. "I admit to the affair with Gina, no denying that now, but the idea to steal and eliminate was all hers. I tried to talk her out of it, but eventually went along. She initiated everything." He confessed after some silence, detailing how Gina persuaded him into the affair and then suggested stealing money from me. Unlike others involved, Denham complied, embezzling $1.8 million over 7 months. But Gina wanted more, claiming my wealth justified it. Denham spoke openly now, expressing remorse for his actions. She wanted more, said $1 million or $2 million wasn't enough. It wasn't fair. I closed the account and covered my tracks. A month later, she talked about eliminating you, wanting us to be together and enjoy your money. She persisted every time we met, painting a vivid picture of our future once you were gone. "And you believed her?" He sighed heavily. "I was a fool, Alex. I convinced myself she loved me. I held on, but she started hinting that if I didn't comply, we might not be together. After weeks of this, I felt trapped. Gina is a cold-blooded monster. When she got the idea, she wouldn't let go, so I found someone to tamper with the brake line. He assured me it could be done without suspicion." He looked at me, worn out. "I know you'll never forgive me, how could you? But I can't believe I did it. It's like I was someone else, like Gina had control over me. I followed her instructions like a puppet. I didn't need to ask if." He'd try again, the answer was clear from the video Asimov had sent me. His voice strained, he admitted, "She wanted to. I persuaded him to wait, but she persisted." He broke down, confessing everything, including the offshore accounts where he stashed the money, except for the $60,000 Gina had already spent. Around 4:30, I handed him over to the guards. Then I returned to the conference room, awaiting Gina's arrival at 5. Each revelation sank in deeper. My wife wasn't just betraying me and stealing, she aimed to ruin me. How could I have been so blind to her true nature after 8 years together? Gina sauntered into the conference room, fashionably late as usual, appearing glamorous yet slightly irked. "Sweetheart, what's with all this? Meredith practically ordered me here, but she hasn't spilled a thing. Is there some company drama? And why did you leave me stranded without a car this morning?" Observing her closely, I detected her faux annoyance masking genuine concern. Likely, she and Denham had been frantically communicating today, trying to decipher the situation. "Darling, please sit down. This isn't easy for me," I feigned emotional struggle, silently relishing every moment. After a pregnant pause during which Gina's knee trembled nervously, I addressed her. "Gina, I know about your infidelity. How could you betray me like this? I believed you loved me." She tried to compose herself, but her eyes widened, and she tensed swiftly. A mix of sadness and empathy flashed across her face, impressive, but expected. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It's just, you were often away, and I—" She broke off, tears welling up. Convincing. I might have softened if I weren't privy to the truth. Still crying, she reached for my hand. "Alex, can you forgive me? I can't bear to lose you. I don't know, Gina. I just don't know. Then, after a pause, tell me everything, when it started, how it unfolded, and why. Above all, why? Why did you do it? Oh, darling, please, let's not delve into it. We can overcome this, I promise. Or I'll make it right. No, Gina, I replied, feigning a strained voice. If we're to move forward, you must be honest with me. Now, when did it begin? How long did it continue? I had her dangling by a thread, relishing the control. She was unsure which lover I knew about. By framing her affair in the past tense, I left her guessing, potentially confessing to a tryst I might not even know about. Reluctantly, she started. As I said, Alex, you were off and away and I felt neglected. I know it's unfair. You've worked tirelessly, built a successful company for us both, but I succumbed to his advances, I suppose, and then I chuckled inwardly. A valiant effort, Gina, but you're not off the hook yet. When was this, Gina? I need specifics. Abruptly, she rose, attempting to embrace me with tear-filled eyes. Alex, I'm so sorry. Holding her at arm's length, I pressed. When was it? I watched her mental calculations flicker in her eyes. She sighed, settling into the chair beside me. A little over 4 years ago. It was Josh Daniels, she admitted. I smirked to myself. Nice try, Gina. Too bad you don't know there's no right choice. Irritation peeked through her facade of sadness as she realized she had no alternative. It had lasted for months. I don't know why, Alex, I lost control. Eventually, I ended it with Josh. It was tearing me apart. I sobbed throughout, and Josh, I cut her off with a shout. You were unfaithful with Josh, too. The panic in her widened eyes was palpable as she pleaded. I don't understand, baby. Eddie Kryler wasn't the only one, I accused. You slept with 2 of my employees. What were you thinking? She tried to interject, but my agitation wouldn't allow it. How do we fix this? How can I trust you again? Everyone at Apex must be laughing behind my back. The boss's wife takes care of the employees. Who else have you been involved with? The janitor? No, baby, just 2, she swore. How can I believe that? I demanded. You've been involved with everyone I know, Dan Cameron, Archie, Peter, Dowell. How can I trust you? Seeing her chance, she rose and took my hands. Alex, it was only those 2 years ago. I've been faithful since, and will be forever. Silence filled the room. I stared at her, masking the anger with sadness. Okay, Gina, I said slowly. So you cheated, but then decided to be faithful again, right? Her eyes held a glimmer of hope. Yes, baby, she said softly. Well, there's one more thing, I said, pushing the laptop toward her. Can you tell me what? With a keystroke, the video played, Jeff's head between Gina's thighs. Her pleasure-filled cries filled the room. Oh yes, Dowell, do it, she moaned. Gina surprised me. She didn't recoil from the laptop like it was a snake. No attempt to flee, no shriek, just a quick, oh, choked out almost immediately. Then, after a pause, she shut the laptop and turned to me, her face transformed from shock to anger, eyes gleaming and mouth twisted into a strained grin. Okay, Alex, you caught me. Congratulations. What do you want me to admit? Yes, I had fun with Dowell, and he was better than you could ever be. Really, Gina, is that why you tried to ruin me? My question rattled her. She froze, staring at me before managing a weak, what? I have no clue what you're talking about. Is that so? I murmured. I opened the laptop, tapped a few keys, and showed her the screen. Our kitchen appeared with Gina and Denham in bathrobes at the table. Gina spoke.
I don't have Dowell.
If the car didn't crash, we'll try again. We need to destroy it differently. Can't we poison it? I silenced the computer and grinned at Gina. I wish I had that video, darling. It'll be tough for you to deny in court. I stared into her cold eyes, seeing her frantic attempts to escape. She abandoned any pretense of remorse or affection. Finally, her voice dripped with contempt. You won't dare go to the police, Alex. You'd be a laughingstock, so would Apex, the head of a billion-dollar company, his wife entertaining the employees. You'd be a worldwide joke. Gina sat there, smug and contemptuous. I dialed Meredith and requested Nancy Lyatt. When she entered, she regarded my wife with disdain. Nancy, my dear wife believes it would be detrimental to arrest her for grand larceny and attempted homicide. Care to share what you told me this morning? Nancy grinned widely. Absolutely, Alex. This saga of Gina and Denham's wicked scheme will dominate the headlines. It has all the elements: money, infidelity, attempted homicide, a stunning woman, betrayal. It'll surpass Paris Hilton and Anna Nicole Smith. Gina will be the scandal of the month, and Apex will gain unprecedented publicity worth more than $500 million in ads. You'll be on Larry King, The Today Show, everywhere. A virtuous businessman deceived by a conniving woman and her puppet. After the trial, Apex will shine in Business Week, Wall Street Journal. You'll earn Entrepreneur of the Year. The company could gain $100 million in business. You'll receive thousands of letters from women vying to be the next Mrs. McMillan. It's a boon for Apex for you. Gina might not find it amusing now, but you're about to enrich a wealthy man even more. As his PR representative, I couldn't concoct anything better. With a wink, Nancy exited. Gina relaxed in her chair, her smile deep and sardonic. Maybe for the first time in all the years I'd known her, she seemed completely beaten. I dialed Meredith's number. "Meredith, you need to call the cops." The following 14 months might have somewhat balanced out what had happened earlier. Or maybe not, it's tough to gauge, but they certainly had their share of drama. The police slapped Gina and Denham with charges including attempted homicide, conspiracy to commit homicide, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and a handful of other offenses. Apex's legal team promptly launched a civil case to reclaim the embezzled funds, which we knew the location of thanks to Denham's confession. And naturally, I promptly initiated divorce proceedings on grounds of infidelity. Thankfully, due to the legal actions, all of Denham's and Gina's accounts linked to mine were frozen. By the time they were out on bail, they couldn't afford high-priced attorneys and had to settle for public defenders for a while. Not a pleasant experience. I ousted Gina from the house and easily obtained a restraining order from the court. The video of her and Denham discussing a second attempt on my life was quite convincing. She persuaded Susan, one of her tennis pals, to put her up in Susan's guest house temporarily. Gina made no effort to reach out to me, not that I anticipated or desired it. She must have realized there was nothing she could say to alter the situation. The Monday following Gina's moment of truth, I summoned Josh and Eddie and let them go. Neither seemed particularly shocked. Eddie just requested that if a potential employer contacted me for a reference, I'd vouch for his solid work at Apex. I readily agreed. Josh attempted to strike a bargain. "Help me land a decent job and I'll testify against Gina in her trial," he proposed. I chuckled and showed him the door. I reminded him that I already had his admission of infidelity and her attempt to coerce him into theft on tape. If he refused to testify, the prosecutors would simply subpoena him. I've appointed Bernie Eisenhardt as Josh's CFO, confident he'll excel. I've tasked him with interviewing candidates for his own replacement as treasurer and for Eddie's role. About 7 months later, Gina and Denham's trial commenced, and it was quite the spectacle, spanning nearly 3 weeks. I attended court sessions intermittently, not feeling compelled to be there every day. Predictably, they couldn't refute their actions, each defense attorney striving to paint the other as the primary culprit. Gina's allure and courtroom demeanor worked wonders on the male jurors. However, the damning video clearly depicted her urging Denham to orchestrate another attempt on my life. Not even Gina could overcome that evidence. They were both convicted on roughly 8 charges, including the primary ones. Throughout the trial, the media attention enabled Gina to secure multiple contracts for magazine and TV interviews, affording her the means to hire a high-priced lawyer. The new legal team has filed appeals, successfully stalling the sentencing process thus far. However, Gina and Dowell are looking at 10 to 15 years behind bars. All the embezzled funds, except for $72,000, were returned to Apex. Given Denham's defunct security firm, I needed someone to fill that role for Apex. During my trip to Los Angeles to express gratitude to Barry Asimov, he recommended hiring David Carlos, who was keen on relocating to the Bay Area, a decision you've witnessed pay off. I believe you'll be pleased with offering him a contract, especially with you as his main client, fostering growth for his business. So I extended a job offer to Carlos, and things seem to be progressing smoothly thus far. While visiting Asimov's office, he surprised me with another video unrelated to the threat from Gina and Denham. "Come to the screening room, Alex. I have something you might find interesting." To my astonishment and amusement, the footage revealed Gina in bed with Charlie Patton, my attorney. Despite being nearly 60 and seemingly not providing Gina much satisfaction, she had seduced him a couple of months earlier and enlisted him to find loopholes in our prenup. Unsurprisingly, given Charlie's legal prowess, he had drafted the prenup himself. He hadn't made much headway. Nonetheless, it didn't deter him from seizing any opportunity Gina presented. I took particular pleasure in publicly accusing Charlie of unethical conduct, raising as much noise as possible. The California Board of Legal Ethics had no option but to disbar him. Furthermore, I sued him and managed to retrieve around $240,000 from his savings, which I then donated to charity. All of this brought me immense satisfaction. Regarding Apex and myself, everything unfolded precisely as Nancy Lyott had anticipated. Initially, there was a surge of media coverage on cable news channels and in tabloids. I made appearances on CNN, featured in Fortune magazine's cover story, graced the front page of the National Enquirer. and appeared in various other outlets. Nancy had to hire 3 additional staff members to manage the increased workload. We convened almost daily to strategize and assess which interviews and opportunities were worth pursuing. In the first half year following the article's publication, Apex's business expanded by nearly 20%. Nancy's prediction about receiving letters from women also proved accurate. We amassed over 8,000 letters, with more pouring in consistently. After reviewing the initial few hundred, some accompanied by suggestive or explicit photos, I delegated the task of responding to them to one of my interns. It's quite possible this guy has a more active romantic life than I do. Additionally, local divorcees and single women reached out. I received propositions from more women than I ever imagined existed. Yet, to my surprise, I discovered I wasn't particularly intrigued. Gina brought me immense carnal satisfaction until our relationship unraveled. I went on dates with 4 women I found attractive, but soon realized that a promiscuous lifestyle wasn't for me. After collaborating closely with Nancy for a few weeks, I realized she was the one I wanted to pursue romantically. We've been dating for nearly a year now, with neither of us feeling rushed to tie the knot, although it may happen eventually. On my recent birthday, Nancy surprised me with a special gift. We spent Saturday night at her place, watching an old Humphrey Bogart movie before indulging in closeness. On Sunday morning, she let me sleep in while she prepared breakfast, which she then brought to the bedroom on a large tray. When I woke up, I found her standing there in her robe, holding breakfast. After we ate, she teased, "Is your present ready?" I'm actually wearing it under my robe. Curiously, I raised my eyebrows, but she only grinned mischievously. "Ready?" she asked, unveiling a white t-shirt adorned with a scanned image of a smiling Gina, likely taken from a photo Nancy found at my home. Beneath the image, in bold letters, it read, "I survived a monster." I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Then I pulled her close, saying, "Come here, you."
My fiance tried to cut out my implant while I was asleep so we could expand our family. Throwaway account because I don't want this attached to my regular account. Anyways, I, 25 female, have a 2-year-old son from a previous relationship. After I gave birth, I was asked about birth control. I said yes, please, and now I have next plan on. A birth control that gets inserted into your upper arm. I was told it lasts 3 years. Cut to now, my fiance, 27 male, told me he wants a baby. I said I did too, just not now, and that I'd get my implant out after the 3 years are up, and I won't replace it. This wasn't soon enough for him. He wanted me pregnant now. I stood firm and said I'm not ready to have another baby. I want to be a little more stable, money-wise and in general. Fiance was mad, and we got into a big argument. I brought up my son and told him my son sees him as a father figure, that we already have a child to take care of while my birth control runs its course. All of a sudden, he started shouting at me, saying he wanted a baby that's biologically his, and that every time he looks at my son, he gets angry. I asked him why, and he told me it's because he sees my ex and my son. My son looks a lot like his father. He then went on to tell me he doesn't feel like a parental figure to my son. He has no personal attachment to him. He says it's because my son isn't biologically his, and he resents us for this, hence the baby talk. He wanted my arm implant out immediately. I said, no way, I'm not ready for another baby yet. We continued to argue about this until I was finally tired and frustrated. So I said I'm done arguing and just headed into our bedroom. An important fact to know is that I take medication to sleep, a pretty strong medication with a high dosage. It knocks me flat on my ass. The Sandman comes and slaps me across the face, so I'm down for the count. After the argument, I took my pills and went to bed. My fiancé was still in the living room when I fell into a deep sleep. Now, another important fact. My fiancé knows where my implant is. He's felt it under my skin as it's very noticeable when you're feeling around for it. I'm sleeping when I stir slightly awake after I felt fingers on my upper arm. With my eyes still shut, I tell my fiancé to stop poking me. I assumed he was just being petty and childish because of the fight. He doesn't stop, and not 5 seconds after poking me, he presses down on the exact spot my next plan is at. At this point, I'm starting to get more alert and annoyed. I just wanted to sleep, and I can't do that when I'm being jabbed. I open my eyes to see what the hell he's doing and ask why his finger is pressing directly on my next planon. The minute I opened my eyes, I noticed an object in his free hand, a box cutter, which was very close to my upper arm. Now I'm on full alert, and I ask him what he's doing. He immediately looks guilty and tries to throw excuses at me. I was just trying to scare you. I was checking to make sure you were alive. And it's a coincidence I'm holding the box cutter. I called on every excuse and said I wanted the truth. He looked down, then told me he was doing me a favor. What favor? Glad you asked. He was going to remove the Nexplanon from my arm. He said he studied how to do it and he's confident he can safely remove it. He said we can start expanding our family now. No need to wait 8 months. I am livid. I immediately shout at him to get the away from me and not to touch me. He tries to talk to me, but I keep yelling he needs to leave. He can't stay at our house right now because he admitted he was trying to cut into my arm, thus breaking my trust. Finally, he walked out of the bedroom, and a minute later I heard the front door open, then close. It's been 3 hours, and he still hasn't come back. I don't know what to do when he does. I don't know where we go from here. I love this man dearly, but I don't think I can forgive and forget this. I don't know what to do. Advice, please. Edit. I called my mother, and she said I can stay with her, so I'm taking my son and leaving. I can't respond to every comment, but just for a few quick questions, he's never acted like this before. He's always been so gentle and kind to me and my son. The argument and then the box cutter is completely new. During the fight, I hoped he was just in the heat of the moment and saying, he doesn't mean because he's angry. I was hoping, naively, that he'd be back to sweet, kind the next morning and apologize for the hurtful comments and trying to overstep my boundaries. I honestly didn't think he'd come at me with a box cutter. A lot of people are saying I should already know what to do. So I guess my IDK what to do should really be phrased as anyone had anything remotely similar to this happen to them? I guess I might have also wanted reassurance that leaving is the best thing to do instead of waiting for him to come home and trying to talk it out. I love this guy deeply, and it's just hard for me to put both pieces of the puzzle together. The sweet guy I knew and the awful guy I saw tonight. Update, essentially my now ex-fiancé did a complete 180 personality-wise. He was so sweet and loving to both me and my son until we fought about having another baby. Last night he said horrible things, and I was tired of fighting, so I took my trazodone and went to bed. Woke up to him touching my arm implant birth control with a box cutter in his hand. He said he was doing me a favor, but I screamed at him to leave. I ended up leaving last night with my son to stay at my mom's. I was confused, shocked, hurt, scared. I still am. At 7 this morning, my phone started buzzing like crazy. Texts, calls, voicemails, all were from him, asking me where I went and when I was coming home. I didn't respond. I just don't even want to look at him or talk to him. Again. He called my mom while we were both sitting in the kitchen discussing everything. She asked me if I wanted her to answer it. I said I just didn't want to talk to him. My mom ended up answering, and my ex was yelling, sounding panicky. He said I left with my son last night out of the blue, and he's worried. No mention of our fight. He asked when my mom last heard from me, and she lied and said last night. He made a noise over the phone, like an angry sigh, and said he was going to keep searching for me, that he's worried something bad has or will happen to me or my son. When my mom hung up, she pulled me into a hug. I guess I had started crying and didn't realize it. She was still hugging me when she asked how I wanted to proceed, if I was done with him for good. I said I was, and she nodded and told me the first thing was to go to the police, like a lot of you said. I didn't have any proof about the box cutter situation. It would come down to my word versus his. If he had even nicked me a little, I'd have a case against him, but since he technically didn't hurt me. The detective said he'd seen cases similar to mine thrown out. The officer did bring up ex partes and suggested I get one for both me and my son immediately, and I went to the courthouse to get the paperwork filled out. I had to detail as much as I could remember from last night, every word and action. My mom helped me, and we got them turned in and moved on to the next step, calling my landlord. I've been living in the same house for 2 years. The first year was a lease, and now I pay month to month. Everything is in my name, and most of the furniture is mine. I told my landlord what was briefly going on and that I was putting in my 30-day notice. My mom has a guest room that she's insisting I stay in. After getting off the phone with him, I called the utilities and closed my accounts: water, electric, gas, internet. Next, my mother asked me what I wanted to do about my belongings. I told her I don't want to leave anything that's mine, all important papers, knickknacks, clothes, furniture, all of it. I just didn't know where to put it, so my mom suggested a storage unit. Once that was decided, we had to figure out when to start the move. Mom ended up calling my two brothers, and they both agreed to help me move, just give them a date and time. I told them definitely sometime this week, and my eldest brother suggested a police presence just in case. I think it's called a civil standby IDK. But I agreed. By this point, it's getting late in the day, and I'm as drained as I can get. I just wanted to go curl up with my son and try to sort my thoughts out and calm down. The county clerk ended up calling me, telling me the judge granted my ex partes. She told me that I needed to come pick up paperwork, which had the court date on it. She also mentioned my ex-fiancé would soon be served, and told me I don't have to see him again until we go to court. To make the ex partes into permanent restraining orders. She suggested lawyering up, but I'm officially burnt out on today. I'll look into lawyers tomorrow, but tonight, after this update, it's a cuddle in bed with my son night. A couple of things that I've seen repeated. Why didn't I leave right when my ex started saying those awful things about my son? I honestly thought he didn't mean them. He's told my son he loves him before. Part of it was also shock. I guess I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and that I was hearing it from someone who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I didn't think he truly had hatred in his heart, and it never crossed my mind that he would hurt me or my son. He's never even spanked my son. I just thought we needed a cooling off period, so I removed myself from the situation to take my meds and sleep, naively thinking things would be better in the morning. People also questioned why I would even bother sticking around to try to talk things out, and that's a valid question that I don't have a rational answer to. Part of me thought I was dreaming, I think, and the other part is the side of me that thinks everything equates to being my fault. Like I was too mean during the fight, too stubborn to see things his way and try to understand his feelings. IDK, it's late. Everything feels surreal, and I have this pit in my stomach that feels like dread. What if my ex shows up at my mom's house? I still haven't returned his messages or phone calls, and now he legally can't contact me anyways. I've had two of my best friends call, saying my ex called them. My younger brother, who I guess has always hated my ex, but I didn't know that until today, said even he got a call. So far, everyone is saying they don't know anything, but I'm scared. IDK, I'm sorry. Just thought I'd update. Update to the update. So many people offered great advice that I'd never think of myself. I've been kind of heavily relying on my mom to guide me through this and keep me and my son afloat. I've also been given several things to read, which I am absolutely going to when I have some downtime. I appreciate every comment, from extremely helpful to well wishes, and even the ones questioning the validity of this. To be honest, and it's a horrible cliché, but if it wasn't happening to me, I probably wouldn't jump to believing it either. Sometimes I let my emotions get the best of me, and I end up sounding either very something in my typing or very unnecessarily dramatic, so I get the mistrust. My update last night was written late. I was exhausted, but I wanted to let the people from my original post know I took their advice and got out of there. My emotions have been so conflicting and chaotic, I'm surprised I was able to sound coherent, let alone like a teenager writing fanfic. I wish this was a fanfic. I could feel safe again. My mom has been an absolute angel, and I've shown her some of your comments complimenting her, and she definitely deserves it. Never once did she make me feel something. I could be completely honest with her. She's reopened her house to me, even though I moved out years ago. She's really kept the ball rolling on everything with her organization skills. She made a list, and yesterday we followed that list to the letter. When I wanted to put stuff off, she gently reminded me of what could happen if I paused. My ex could find me, hurt my son, or anyone helping to protect me. You all are very right, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't realize just how much support I have and what a tremendous family I have. A couple of people mentioned to be careful if my ex finds out where I am, and my mom and brothers already had a plan for me. They called it round robing. If my ex found me at mom's, I'd flee to my eldest brother. If he finds me at my eldest brother's, I'd temporarily stay with my younger brother. Really, I appreciate you all commenting that I'm doing things right and quick, and how impressive it is, but that's not my doing at all. That's all on my family. They're the extraordinary ones. There goes my fanfic cliches again, going above and beyond for me and my son. Some of the comments that questioned my validity remarked that it was odd that I immediately went to Reddit to see what to do, how to feel. You're all right that it is unusual, but not for me. I grew up when LiveJournal was a big thing. Writing helps me organize my thoughts, and I figured this community would help me understand, and I was right. Another thing I want to address is my ex's sudden change. I'm now wondering what to do for that. I don't want him in my life still, but some of you mentioned a brain tumor or a psychotic break, so I'm worried. I sent my ex's mother and father a message this morning saying I broke off the engagement and left, but both messages are still unread. I don't know what to say to them in regards to my ex's health. Will they be mad for daring to say this might be a breakdown? Will they actually take him to get tests run, and if they even tried, would he willingly go? I don't know. I guess I need a little more advice about how to broach that. There's more to address, and I even had a consultation with a lawyer today, but I can go into that another time. I'm still processing everything. It still doesn't feel real. It feels like a badly written teenage fanfic, to be honest. IDK, sorry for rambling again, guys. I just wanted to let you know I'm taking notes from your helpful suggestions, that I'm not ignoring you guys. My mother took my son for ice cream and let me stay behind, which is why I decided to hop on Reddit and check on everything. One last thing though, the awards. I'm truly humbled and grateful for them. Some of them I had to click on to see what it meant, and they're all so sweet. I'm endlessly thankful for the awards, your comments, and your messages. Thank you. Further update, when my ex was served his papers, he did not take it well. I had already blocked him on everything, but he took a picture of his paper and posted it on Facebook with a message to me and my son. A mutual friend saw it, and that it contained my personal information, and screenshotted it to let me know. After taking advice, I called the police to see if it was a break in the ex parte. They made an incident report and told me I could pick it up the next day at the police station. They didn't arrest him. My mother had already procured me a great lawyer, a shark, which is what we need, in her own words. I told my lawyer about the screenshot, and he immediately put in both his appearance on my behalf and a motion for contempt of court for breaking the ex parte and threatening me and my son. Our original official court date isn't until next week, but the judge got us in early to deal with the screenshot. My ex showed up without a lawyer, and I showed up with only my lawyer due to COVID. No extra people allowed in the courtroom. I really wanted my mom there with me, but my lawyer, instead of sitting on the bench at the sides reserved for lawyers, sat by me, kept himself between me and my ex at all times. A best friends forever was there as well. I guess it's standard procedure to have one in court. My lawyer advised me to let him do all the talking, only answer questions when directed at me, and answer them as succinctly as possible. The judge ended up giving my ex a warning, saying if he even mentions me or my son, he'd put him in jail, 24 hours for every incident until the official court date. My ex was also ordered to pay my legal fees for the emergency session. Friday, we got mine and my son's possessions out of the house, with massive help from friends and family. I knew my ex had to work Friday, and we arrived with a police officer just in case. An hour after my ex should have been at work. We left anything that he could claim as his or that we'd bought together I didn't care about. Most of the items went into different storage units from the same place. The reason we chose these storage units is they're gated and locked at night. The items me or my son would need for everyday use went to my mom's. My ex's parents have opened my messages now, but they still haven't responded. My lawyer said we're still on for the official court date next week, and nobody's entered their appearance yet on behalf of my ex, so we're unsure if he has a lawyer or not. My lawyer told me it would follow basically the same as the first hearing. It'll be a general hearing with other people having filed their own ex parts for other people. No extras allowed in the room. Face masks required. He'd keep my ex away from me, no talking unless answering questions, give succinct answers unless asked to clarify. He's confident that the ex partes will become permanent restraining orders, but he warned me it's not like it is in movies. The restraining orders will go for 1 year unless a box is marked saying to reissue it every year. I marked the box. He also said for every year, my ex has the ability to appeal it and we'd have to go to court all over again. For now, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I'm kind of afraid because I've had people message me to tell me they've seen my post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Some of you sleuths have even found the state I live in. I'm just hoping my ex doesn't find any of the posts and put 2 and 2 together. I'm sorry I haven't responded to every comment or message, and that this update is late. I've just been trying to keep my son's life as normal as possible. It breaks my heart when he asks when we're going home or where Papa is. He just knows we're having a long sleepover with his Mimi. He's loving having pets around, though. We weren't allowed to have animals at my house, so the fact that my mom has a dog and a couple of cats, he's excited. I've warned his daycare about my ex. Most of my family and friends are aware there's a serious situation, but not the details. IDK, it's been a long week. I'm exhausted. I keep looking over my shoulder, and I've made my mom buy extra locks for the doors. Some have mentioned cameras for the outside, and my mom has already started pricing some. She said her sister, my aunt, has been trying to get her to try Ring for months, so this is the kick in the pants she needed. I'm sorry the update is late, still feels surreal, but I have to just keep swimming. My son is obsessed with Finding Nemo.
I'm a 38-year-old man, happily married to a 41-year-old woman for about 15 years. We have 2 great kids in elementary school. Initially, our relationship was smooth and problem-free, but things took a turn for the worse after we got married. Despite our efforts to fix things, we couldn't maintain stability. I constantly tried to meet her ever-changing expectations, and it felt like as soon as I solved one problem, another one emerged. This cycle was exhausting, making me feel tired and disappointed. A few weeks ago, I made the tough choice to move out of our house. In December, she confided in me that she considered herself frigid and had no interest in being close. Even though I had stopped initiating closeness a few years ago, she claimed it was unique to her. We sought therapy to address our closeness issues, discovering her past trauma. We spent several years in therapy, even seeking specialized help from another therapist. Despite our best efforts, our situation deteriorated, and for the last 7 years, we've had no bed life. I've battled mild depression throughout my life and eventually needed medication to cope. The combination of these meds and my kids prevented me from breaking down. In the new year, I noticed restlessness in my wife. She started reconnecting with old friends in different states, some of whom were going through divorces. After spending time with them, she confessed she wanted a divorce. The pain from our relationship struggles became unbearable. This time, it felt like I was mourning the loss of our entire family. As I dealt with my emotions, I began to reorganize my life whenever I could. I'm currently in the process of getting things in order. She's currently on a work break, and almost every day when I come home with the kids, she's absent. She retreats to our bedroom, and at times, her dissatisfaction with the kids or me has led me to take them to their grandparents to protect them from the tense atmosphere at home. During these tough times, I only reached out to my brother and his wife for support. Given my mother's ongoing battle with cancer, I didn't want to burden them further, but one weekend, things changed. During a rare free moment, my wife chose to spend time with her old friends. Feeling out of place, I asked my brother for a conversation. During our talk, he mentioned that his wife wanted to discuss something important, and his words shocked me. He suggested, "Maybe you should consider not delaying the divorce and talk to our parents." He revealed that a few years ago, they had an affair. During a family holiday, a conversation between my wife and my brother's wife took an unexpected turn. My wife said, "If we ever get divorced, I'll take everything he has from him." My heart raced, and I had a panic attack, the first since my teenage years. Her statements were so out of character that I couldn't believe she was serious. I turned to my brother for answers, desperate to know if it was a joke. His wife confirmed that my wife was serious. She then shared this revelation with my parents, leading me to call them. During that call, my emotions were in turmoil. I cried, felt awkward, and was deeply hurt. I felt sorry for burdening them, especially considering their own challenges. During the conversation, my mother disclosed that my wife had confided in her years ago. It turned out my wife was jealous of one of my cousins who had recently divorced. She admired their courage, but my mother chose not to tell me, thinking it didn't matter. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. A clearer image of my wife began to form in my mind. I'd always had suspicions, but whenever I voiced them, she brushed them off and accused me of being paranoid and having trust issues. She convinced me she wasn't capable of such actions, making me doubt my intuition. Over time, I continued to gather information about our financial responsibilities, taxes, and other important matters. My wife's behavior became increasingly erratic, and it seemed like she was distancing herself from our relationship. She frequently sought opportunities to be away from our home and had a strong aversion to it. Eventually, she found comfort in living with her friend's elderly mother, who only asked for minimal rent. It turned out this woman craved companionship and needed assistance with household chores. A few weeks ago, after a night out with friends, we sat down with the children to have an open conversation about the situation. One of our kids, visibly upset, sought comfort in hugging their mother tightly, while another child reacted more calmly. But the emotions of the third child ran high. Upon learning that she would take the family dog with her in less than a week, she decided to move out earlier than planned. My early morning hospital shifts made it challenging for her to come home at 2 a.m. to look after the kids. The day finally came when she moved out as scheduled, and my parents picked up the children. Unfortunately, she left without even hugging the kids goodbye. Less than a week after her departure, I mustered the courage to consult a lawyer and initiate the legal process. Surprisingly, she cooperated with the lawyer and promptly signed all the required documents to move the case forward. However, during the time the children were in my care, she made no effort to contact them. Her interactions with them were limited, and according to the kids, she often preferred exercising and burying herself in her phone without genuine interest in their lives. Regrettably, it seems my wife lacks a genuine interest in our children's lives, except for maintaining her appearance. I won't delve into further details. After her departure, I gradually adapted to the situation and strived to provide a stable environment for our children. During her visits, I even supplied food when she faced financial difficulties and had nothing to eat. I also offered financial help a couple of times when she was in a tight spot. In an attempt to maintain civility, I decided to provide her with some financial assistance, considering it a contribution to our shared account, which we hadn't yet divided. Some may criticize this decision as foolish, but I believe it fosters a better environment and contributes to our children's well-being. That's what I tell myself, and it's not entirely untrue. The culmination of all these issues occurred at the end of last week when she took the children away for a few days, coinciding with one of my long shifts. Upon returning home from work that day, I consciously used the time without my children to engage in various hobbies and activities I enjoy, including working on music. I set up my computer and started connecting everything. Unfortunately, annoying messages about synchronization issues with my wife's iCloud account kept popping up on the screen. Disappointed, I attempted to resolve the problem. While navigating the photos on my computer, I stumbled upon something unexpected. If you think you know what happened next, your assumptions are correct. Despite her attempts to clean the computer before leaving, some remnants went unnoticed. To my surprise, I found a large number of photos and videos, some of which were explicit and revealed her infidelity with a mutual friend. This discovery was devastating, as it felt like I had spent the last 15 years of my life in a marriage built on a false illusion. It shattered the image she had crafted over the years. The day after uncovering these clues, she brought the children back home, and I made an effort to remain composed. I chose not to confront her about what I had found, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the sake of our children. There are other aspects of this story that I may share in the future. A part of me appreciates that I did everything I could to salvage our relationship, because without this revelation, I might have remained oblivious to the truth. I wonder if I would have regretted not putting in more effort. However, another part of me underscores the importance of trusting your intuition. Sometimes, when something doesn't feel right, it's crucial not to let others convince you otherwise. I'm not suggesting that one's intuition is always accurate, but it shouldn't be dismissed. In any case, to provide more context, let me fill in some gaps. Firstly, the person she cheated with isn't married. He's her ex-boyfriend. I discovered a message she sent to him during our therapy sessions, in which she vividly described a dream of engaging in an act with her ex-boyfriend. She concluded the message by advising him not to disclose it to me, claiming I'd react strongly. When I confronted her about this, she brushed off my concerns, saying I was overreacting, and even suggested that our therapist shared the same view. Interestingly, it turned out that this therapist was the same one she had seen during her teenage and early 20s. In hindsight, I question why I ever thought this therapist was the right choice. I want to stress the importance of honesty and open communication. Let me clarify that I have no intentions of sharing any of her photos. I see them as undeniable evidence of her unfaithfulness, and yes, they are time-stamped. I plan to provide all this information to my lawyer. Since the start of January, I've diligently documented each day, carefully recording the time and details of her actions and interactions with the children. Now that she's moved into her own place, I won't be able to videotape these interactions anymore. I considered the option of audio recording during our personal conversations, and my lawyer supported this idea. Currently, it appears that she's deeply in love with someone else and is looking forward to a divorce, especially because she's entitled to half of my $401k. As for our property, before she moved out, we managed to divide everything amicably. Truth be told, we didn't have much property to split because we sold our house at the end of last year. After the sale, my wife and I decided to move into my parents' old house, which is in a trust and doesn't belong to either of us. We evenly divided the money we received from the house sale between us. Unfortunately, my wife managed to spend her share of approximately $14,000 in less than 2 months, leaving very little behind. Some of this money went towards supporting her lover, as indicated by a $100 bill I have. There may be other evidence of similar expenses. Initially, we agreed on a 50-50 custody arrangement for the children, with neither of us paying alimony or child support. However, after this situation came to light, my lawyer mentioned that the original agreement might not hold much legal weight. He offered to formalize it if I wanted, but at the time, I told him not to worry since no information about it had surfaced. About a week later, I brought up the topic of revising the custody agreement with my wife. I suggested adjusting it to a 60-40 split in my favor. Surprisingly, when I proposed that she become the primary guardian, she agreed without any resistance. I suspect her current focus on her own life has driven her to create the image of a responsible mother. Her own mother often engages in conversations with her, believing she's fulfilling her parental duties, which only adds to my wife's stress. Yesterday, I received an unexpected phone call from her. This was unusual since she typically communicates via text messages. I had the impression she wanted to discuss the person she's dating, but her actual intentions surprised me. During the call, she tearfully shared her struggles with physical therapy due to a toe injury she sustained at work last year. She expressed frustration with the slow progress in treatment and difficulty in moving her toe correctly. Furthermore, she mentioned that she's not allowed to drive for health reasons. During our conversation, she told me she's heavily involved in physical exercises, which brought a faint smile to my face for the first time since I found the incriminating photos and videos. She also spoke of financial difficulties and doubts about selling the house where she now lives with someone else. Moreover, she expressed concerns about how she'll manage her time with the children upon returning to work, despite having taken them with her for part-time weekends over the last 2 weeks. She mentioned that she had many plans for the upcoming weekend in the city. During the conversation, it became evident that she was finding it challenging to spend consistent time with the children, and she couldn't see them as often as she'd like. In response, I tried to remain accommodating, hoping we could work together to establish a daily routine that would allow her regular access to the children. However, she mentioned casually that her initial plan to move closer to us might not be feasible due to potential high costs. She might have to move even farther away, around 15 miles. In response to her uncertain life situation, I reassured her that, for the children's sake, we'd find a way to resolve the issue. But to my surprise, she seemed open to this possibility. She casually brought up the idea of moving across the border to a neighboring state to secure a higher income despite increased living costs. This decision would mean we'd be quite far apart, about 70-90 miles, making it likely that she'd see the children even less often. I couldn't help but feel disheartened, as I could hardly imagine how such a significant move would align with the children's schedule and well-being. As I watched the situation unfold and considered our shared responsibilities, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was becoming less interested in our children, almost as if she were trying to shift her parental duties onto me. The thought that she wanted to move so far away from the children we brought into this world troubled me deeply. After making the decision to unravel the situation, I embarked on an investigation to uncover more pieces of the puzzle. In the course of this investigation, I delved into her lover's social media account and stumbled upon explicit evidence about her partner. This revelation was a harsh reality for her. It became evident that she was willing to forsake her own children to be closer to her lover. Her choice to relocate was primarily motivated by the opportunity to be with her lover, leading her to consider abandoning our children and parental responsibilities, leaving me as the sole caregiver. Simultaneously, she aimed to keep up the appearance of a responsible mother in front of family and friends. I couldn't fathom how one could upend their entire life and schedule based on their lover's whims. I was devastated, filled with heartache and anger. I couldn't let her shirk her responsibilities as a parent. Observing her attempt to maintain the facade of a caring mother while planning to desert our family, I took decisive action. I reached out to my lawyer and filed a request to terminate her parental rights. When she called to chastise me for my actions, I disclosed the truth to her. Her decision to leave the family was solely influenced by her affair partner. I implored her to consider transferring custody of the children to me. During our conversation, it seemed like she might agree, but her stance quickly changed. When I mentioned that I wouldn't hide the truth, she reacted with anger and surprise. She flatly refused to relinquish her parental rights, stubbornly upholding the facade of motherhood, despite her actions suggesting otherwise. It was evident that she cared more about fulfilling her own desires than the welfare of our children. Disappointment and determination welled up within me, driving me to reveal the truth to her family. I believed it was necessary for them to understand the kind of person she had become. Despite the painful nature of this step, I deemed it essential for securing my children's future. Upon learning of my actions, she grew furious and persistently contested my decision. She made it clear that she intended to proceed with her move and had no intention of surrendering her maternal rights. She proposed that we co-parent from a considerable distance. In response, she accused me of being vindictive and manipulative, but I chose not to engage in an argument with her. Instead, I sought legal assistance and discussed alimony with my father. When she realized that receiving alimony would require her to financially contribute to our children's support, something she couldn't afford, the situation shifted. Her partner didn't appear willing to assume that responsibility either. Suddenly, she became concerned about preserving her reputation. Overburdened with the responsibilities of a responsible parent, she couldn't bear the financial weight of alimony and feared further damage to her image. In the end, she abandoned her relocation plans and reluctantly consented to continue shared custody of our children. This victory was hard-won and rooted in my unwavering principles. Despite knowing that she prioritized her lover over our children, I refused to compromise their well-being for her sake. I did everything in my power to ensure the mother of my children remained a part of their upbringing and lives. Naturally, her lover didn't want these complications, and he soon vanished from my ex-wife's life. Afterward, she made active attempts to seduce me and rekindle a relationship to return to our lives with the children. However, I firmly conveyed that I had no interest in someone as dishonest and fickle as her. End of the story. I am a 50-year-old nurse, working diligently at a busy hospital. Currently, I find myself at a crucial moment in life. In front of me, there's a green piece of paper with my name and signature, and it's a divorce document. As I look at it, I let out a heavy sigh. Let me introduce you to my wife, Mary, who happens to be 3 years younger than me. Our story started 5 years ago when I got married at the age of 45. We met at work, where Mary was a medical assistant. Both of us were so focused on our careers that finding a life partner wasn't something we'd thought much about. But fate had other plans, and we started dating, which eventually led to marriage. Considering our ages, we took things slow before deciding to get married. After a few years of dating, we tied the knot later in life, with me at 45 and Mary at 42. We decided not to have children and dedicated our years to each other. Little did we know that our ideal vision of marriage would soon be tested. Reality had different plans for us. Our demanding jobs led to conflicting schedules, especially because of my night shifts. Health issues, especially for Mary, became a part of our lives. Menopause arrived, bringing with it a range of challenges like constant irritability, fatigue, mood swings, and emotional turmoil. Although I struggled to fully understand what she was going through, it was clear that Mary was in pain. Our lives became filled with minor disputes, and our relationship was overshadowed by exhaustion and dissatisfaction. Over 5 years, our affection had turned into indifference. I began to question the purpose of our relationship. Every day felt like a battleground with arguments and bitter exchanges. Was this the life we were meant to live? My thoughts were interrupted when Mary returned home. She greeted me apathetically as she entered, hiding the divorce papers under the table. I waited for her in the living room, and when she appeared, her mood matched the cold atmosphere. Even a simple hi felt like a reminder of the love that had faded away. Summoning my courage, I brought up the topic of divorce. Mary's reaction was unexpectedly calm. She showed no surprise or sorrow. Her composed demeanor reflected acceptance. Her response matched the frigid state of our relationship. With few words exchanged, I handed her the divorce papers, and she signed them without hesitation. Tomorrow, I plan to submit these papers to City Hall, marking the end of a 5-year chapter in our lives. At this turning point, I reflect on the journey I embarked on: a late marriage born from work, a union that showed promise but succumbed to its challenges. As I stand on the edge of change, I think about the choices that brought us here. Sometimes life's complexities unravel even the strongest bonds, leaving behind memories of what was and what might have been. "I'll prepare dinner one last time," Mary said, her voice filling the kitchen as she started cooking. Even after signing the divorce papers, Mary's demeanor remained unchanged. The routine continued. She ate her dinner and went to bed early. It felt strangely surreal how nothing seemed different on the surface, but beneath it, change had indeed occurred. I realized this just before bedtime. Our bedroom looked the same, but something had shifted. We slept in separate beds, a practice that had become unfamiliar over time. Sharing a bed had become a rarity, replaced by the quiet separation of separate sleeping arrangements. As I struggled with sleeplessness, Mary initiated a conversation. The distance between us had limited meaningful exchanges, but tonight was an exception. We reminisced about our early days, laughing as we recalled a time when Mary used to sneak into my bed, complaining about the cold, her playful attempts to get my attention. In our prime, subtle flirtations were common, though age had tamed those impulses. Tonight, Mary's choice of clothing seemed reminiscent of those days. Her skimpy pajamas brought back memories. She caught my gaze and expressed her desire with a knowing smile. "May I join you in bed? It's chilly," she requested, her words hanging in the air. I hesitated briefly, but welcomed her into the sheets. We acknowledged the passage of time, no longer the young lovers of the past, now on the brink of parting ways. With a shared understanding, we decided to make this night a poignant memory. Mary's presence next to me brought back bittersweet memories. Over the years, life had changed her, a testament to the challenges she had faced. It wasn't about rekindling the marriage, but a silent wish to see her content. Amid these thoughts, we exchanged a simple goodnight. Sleep soon overtook us, ending the day. The next morning came, and Mary was gone. Her things had disappeared from our room, leaving no sign of her. However, there was a note in the living room, a brief message thanking me and urging me to take care of myself. That's all it said, a heartfelt farewell. Months passed, and life took a new direction. A change in jobs led me to a busy hospital, providing a fresh start that distanced me from the memories of a failed marriage. The divorce had created discomfort at work, and the need for financial stability influenced my choices. Despite being single, my dedication to work remained unchanged. The idea of marriage was distant. For now, I found comfort in the absence of workplace romances, a chapter firmly closed. "Mr. Jones, a new patient arrived some time ago. My boss called me over, and as I looked through the patient's paperwork, I realized that this person was battling cancer. They had been getting treatment at another hospital as an outpatient, but now they were being admitted for chemotherapy. Surprisingly, this patient had the same name as my ex-wife, Mary, and even more astonishing, their last name matched Mary's maiden name. Feeling a strange connection, I went to greet her while checking her temperature. "Excuse me, it's time for your temperature check," I said as I entered the private room. The patient, who had been looking out of the window, turned to face me. To my amazement, It was Mary, the woman I had once been married to. Her face was pale, cheeks sunken, and she looked incredibly thin, but there was no doubt it was her. In a faint but unmistakable voice, I heard Mary's familiar tone. She was also surprised to see me, but my surprise was even greater. The medical chart showed the seriousness of her cancer. It was more than just some weight loss or low energy. Looking at her drastically changed condition, it was clear she was in critical condition. The chart also indicated that her cancer had been diagnosed just before we divorced. On the day I brought up the divorce, Mary must have known about her illness. "Why didn't you tell me about the cancer?" I blurted out, even though I knew I didn't have the right to know anymore. Mary responded, explaining that she thought our marriage was already falling apart, with or without the cancer. She blamed herself for the deterioration, and realized she couldn't hold me back, especially given her limited time. Listening to her explanation, regret washed over me. Why hadn't we communicated better? Why hadn't I noticed her changes? I had let her go through her illness alone, adding to her pain. Despite her health struggles, she had agreed to the divorce. Amid my self-blame and despair, Mary scolded me, saying, "You're healthier than I am, so don't hang your head so low." She reminded me of the times she had supported me during my moments of self-doubt. Now, I was facing the consequences of not repaying her kindness. The woman who had been my support for 5 years was right in front of me. I looked at Mary with newfound determination. I knew I didn't have the right to say this, but I wanted to take care of her until the end. I bowed my head, and in response, Mary gently smacked me on the head, with a mix of exasperation and joy on her face. With persistence, I wore down her reluctance, and she finally agreed with an expression that combined both emotions. From that moment on, I took care of Mary. Despite her parents visiting, it was clear that she needed additional care and support. While I had worried that her family might not accept me, they did. Understanding the complexities of the situation, with Mary's family living far away, it fell on me to tend to her daily needs. In the following months, I visited Mary's hospital room without fail, regardless of my work schedule. I was there before work, after work, during days off, and before night shifts. Mary's chemotherapy treatment began, and although I had cared for numerous patients professionally, the experience was entirely different when it was a family member. Treating a stranger versus treating family brought forth a tidal wave of emotions. My intention was to provide professional support, but inevitably, my heart became deeply involved in her journey. I was overwhelmed by despair. Mary had immediately started treatment after our divorce, yet it appeared ineffective against the metastasized cancer. The harsh reality of cancer treatment, painful and grueling, was something she faced alone. I deeply wished I could have been there for her, but helplessness held me captive in the face of adversity. Mary's spirit remained unbroken. She fought her battle with courage, even managing to smile despite the misery. Her resilience, however, painfully, reminded me of my own limitations. There was little I could do to alleviate her suffering. Then, a cruel twist. Mary's treatment had to be halted. Due to her weakened state, aggressive measures were no longer feasible, and we had to embrace this heart-wrenching reality. Mary accepted it with grace, whispering her intent to live her remaining days to the fullest. I became her pillar of support, sharing laughter over anecdotes, taking walks on better days, and even attempting crafts together. Although my attempts were often clumsy, Mary's laughter at my awkward creations brought us immense joy, and for a while these simple pleasures sufficed. Amid these tender moments, the cancer persisted, taking a relentless toll on her. Our days of joy were fleeting as her condition deteriorated rapidly. Sleepless nights were plagued by pain, and tears streamed down more frequently, often hidden from my view. Painkillers helped ease her distress, but gradually vitality waned, and her laughter became rare. I could only offer words of encouragement, but Mary valued them deeply. "Thank you for always being there," she expressed, acknowledging the significance of my presence. My daily visits gave her the strength to continue, a sentiment she openly shared. Her immobility drew us closer, and yet we remained strangers in the eyes of the world due to our past choices. I had wanted it that way, but now regret knotted me. In an attempt to convey my rekindled feelings, I made a heartfelt proposal to Mary in that quiet hospital room. "Will you marry me?" I finally uttered. Mary's response, light-hearted and affectionate, expressed her delight despite her refusal. While I was met with a resounding rejection, I couldn't give up. I presented her with a marriage certificate, my signature already adorning it. Her joy at the gesture was palpable, a testament to the connection we had forged. A few days later, Mary passed away, exceeding her expected time. For a month, she fought bravely with unwavering determination. While grieving her loss and preparing for her funeral, I realized she had lived an extra month. Because of our strong connection, the funeral plans came together quickly. Even though we weren't legally married, Mary's parents insisted that I sit with them in the family section. Initially hesitant, I accepted and felt honored by their gesture. The funeral proceeded, and eventually we made our way to the gravesite. Surprisingly, I didn't shed tears. I had already cried while taking care of Mary. As we waited for the final part of the burial, I sat on a bench, staring blankly at the sky. Mary was no longer in this world, leaving a void in my heart. Unexpectedly, Mary's mother noticed me. She softly said, "Ken, you were here." Her red, swollen eyes revealed the depth of our shared grief. Her sorrow was undoubtedly deeper than mine, as she had lost her daughter. She gave me a letter that Mary had intended to receive on the day of her funeral. With a trembling heart, I received the letter and a diary that Mary had left behind. Opening the diary, I found it to be as simple and genuine as Mary herself. It began with short notes about everyday things but became more detailed when we met. It chronicled our dates, my job evaluations, our conversations, and even the ordinary mishaps of our life together. The entries shifted from notes about me to reflections on her own feelings. As she approached menopause, her tone changed. She expressed frustrations and regrets, especially about how she had directed her frustrations at me. She regretted her inability to have productive conversations and acknowledged my growing emotional distance. The last pages of the diary were filled with a heavy sense of remorse, a recurring theme day after day. One specific date in the diary caught my attention. It was a month before our divorce, the day she learned of her cancer diagnosis. She had deliberately hidden her emotions from me, keeping a tough exterior. A particular entry stood out, the day I had proposed divorce. Her words painted a picture of her happiness as she reminisced about our earlier, happier times. But then her entry abruptly ended, leaving me with the weight of her unspoken thoughts. I hadn't realized how deeply she had been thinking about me. With a heart full of emotion, I turned to the letter. She expressed disbelief at seeing me again in a new hospital, and her hesitation to burden me with her situation. However, my offer to care for her had deeply moved her. She apologized for not being able to refuse and nearly breaking down emotionally. When I proposed again, her regrets had faded, and she faced her imminent departure with acceptance. She asked me not to grieve for her and urged me to wait until old age to reunite in heaven. Her final wish was clear that if my feelings remained unchanged, we would marry again in the afterlife. The letter ended with the promise to keep our marriage certificate. As I read, tears flowed uncontrollably. Mary's emotions poured from these pages, and I was touched by the depth of her feelings. Mary's parents' gesture of allowing me to sit with the family at the funeral aligned with Mary's wishes. For a while I openly wept with swollen eyes, yet by the grave I remembered her wish for me not to cry. So I composed myself and bid her farewell with a smile. Mary rested peacefully in the casket, holding our marriage certificate. Her expression was calm, and her grasp on the document was strong. Her signature, below mine, marked a bond that had endured trials and sorrow.
It was an unforgettable day, I can tell you that. By all accounts, it was a regular Saturday night dinner. Even young Rachel was there, staying with us for the weekend as she often did. Rachel's mother, Andorra, was a widow and worked weekends as a cab controller. Rachel and our daughter, Orderly, became best friends in high school and often had sleepovers. Rachel stayed with us on Fridays and Saturdays while her mother worked 12-hour night shifts. My ex-wife, Marge, knew Andorra well, but I had never met her. Marge thought Andorra might turn my head, so we never crossed paths. I traveled a lot for work then, trying to break into a crowded market. Marge usually handled the kids, and on Sundays, Rachel would be picked up by any available cab. Rachel enjoyed the treats the cab drivers brought, and Orderly liked it too. Now, back to that infamous Saturday night dinner. The four of us were eating when Marge, without warning, announced, "Pete, I want a divorce. I'm leaving you." She said it as if she hadn't just dropped a bombshell. When your wife of 10 years suddenly says she wants a divorce, your first reaction is disbelief. I said I want a divorce. I found someone else, and I want to spend the rest of my life with him. With 2 8-year-old girls at the table, including our daughter, I kept my composure. I was proud of my self-control. I must have said something stupid like, "If that's the case, I'm going apartment hunting tomorrow." Marge responded, "No, you'll have to keep the house. You'll need it for orderly." I stopped pretending to eat and stared at Marge. "We're going on a trip around the world, and orderly can't miss her schoolwork," she added, not even looking up. "You've got to be kidding me," I replied louder than I intended, trying to stay calm for the girls. Marge probably chose this moment because she knew I'd hold back in front of the children. "I want to see the world while I'm still young enough to enjoy it," she said, oblivious to the irony. When we first met, I was passionate about traveling. I planned to travel the world after finishing my engineering degree. Marge and I talked about seeing the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, Ayers Rock, and New Zealand. But Marge wanted to have children first. She said, "While I'm young enough to enjoy them." Irony or what? I thought I understood Marge's position. Her parents were old when she was born, so she wanted to travel the world once the kids were grown. Apparently, she changed her mind. Taking care of orderly wasn't as fun as she thought. The pregnancy and birth were difficult, and she dropped the idea of having more kids without much discussion. I nearly broke down, but couldn't laugh out loud. Instead, I got up and started pruning the roses in the garden. After a while, I noticed Rachel and Orderly quietly helping. "Watch out for thorns, girls. You're not wearing gardening gloves," I warned. "We'll be careful, Dad," Orderly replied. "What's your mom doing?" I asked. "She's upstairs packing," Orderly said calmly. I was furious but didn't want to destroy the roses. I watched the girls and resisted the urge to confront Marge. How could any mother, especially my wife, do this to her child? "Sorry, Orderly," I said. "Why, Daddy? You didn't leave us. Mom did," she replied. "Most kids at school have dads who left. I'd rather stay with a dad who loves me than a mom who—" She didn't finish, and I still wonder what she meant. Marge always seemed to be a loving mother. Was I blind to something? I realized the girls were holding hands and working together on the same rose bush. I could hear Marge talking on the phone, probably to her new man. "Ice cream," I announced. "Let's get the biggest ice cream we can find, girls." They cheered, and we went to a restaurant for sundaes. It took them a while to eat, giving me time to process Marge's announcement and its consequences. Surprisingly, I didn't care that Marge was leaving. Any love I had for her vanished with her announcement. My main concern was childcare. I could take care of Orderly but needed help with school and vacations. My employers might help, but work hours clashed with school hours. I realized Rachel's mother would have to deal with her own problems while I managed mine. I thought I would have to call my sister Carol later to explain the situation. My only plan was to see if Carol could pick up Orderly from school, even though it would be a long drive. I called Carol, hoping she'd have a solution. "What did she do?" Carol shouted when I briefly explained Marge's statement, trying not to go into details in front of the girls. I realized I knew very little about Marge's affair. "Carol, Marge ran off with some guy and left us." "Who? What guy?" Carol demanded. "I have no idea. Just some Casanova, I guess." "His name is Ronald," said Orderly. "He's a library customer," added Rachel. Marge had been working part-time at the library. I repeated their words to Carol. "My problem is, I don't know how to handle picking up Orderly from school every day. I can drop her off in the mornings, but I can't finish work by 2:30. "It's okay, Daddy. Rachel's mom is picking me up," Orderly said. "It wouldn't be fair to ask her to do that every day," I replied. "Oh, that won't be a problem. We've thought of everything," Orderly explained. "Rachel will stay with us on weekends, and I'll stay with Rachel and her mom during the week. On Mondays, you can drive us to school, and Rachel's mom will pick us up." Carol, overhearing, said, "I think it's a brilliant plan, Pete. Did you ask her?" "No, I've never met Rachel's mother. I had no idea if she would agree." "The cab driver has been asking my mom to work on Sundays," Rachel joined in. "Mom said she'd earn more working Sundays, but didn't want to impose on Orderly's mom." "The kids have solved your problem. What does Rachel's mother look like?" "I have no idea. I've never met her." "Well, you'd better go talk to her soon and see what she thinks of the plan." Carol then asked, "Has Marge moved out yet?" "I have no idea. We're at a restaurant. I think she was packing when we left." "Get some new door locks while you're in town. Call me if you need anything tonight. Frank and I can come over if you want, but we'd have to bring the kids." "Thank you, Carol, but I don't think it will be necessary. The help I need is right here with me." The girls grinned at each other, then at me. Carol wasn't surprised or upset that Marge was leaving. They were never close. After finishing the ice cream, we went back to the car. I had to inform Rachel's mother that I'd be the only adult with the girls that evening and make sure she was okay with it. There are some strange people these days, and I hadn't met Rachel's mother yet. I pulled up outside the cab office and went inside to find Rachel's mother, leaving the girls in the car. "I'm Pete Thomas. I'm looking for Rachel's mother," I said to the cabbie behind the counter. I vaguely remembered him from a Sunday pickup. Oddly, I didn't know Rachel's mother's real name. We always called her Rachel's mother, and Rachel called her Mom. The cabbie gestured to a door marked Ladies Only, with a paper reading Andora's office. The other cab drivers in the office went silent, focusing on the TV. After a seemingly long wait, Andora emerged. She was stunning, dressed simply in tight jeans and a blouse, yet looked like a runway model. "Andora, there's a guy here to see you," said the cabbie. "Hey, Pete, is something wrong?" she asked, smiling but slightly concerned. "Yeah, no, well, maybe," I replied nervously. "Rachel is fine. I just need to talk privately." The cab drivers began to leave, but Andora told them to stay, and we went outside. "What's up, Peter? You don't look too good," Andora said as she noticed the girls in the car and waved. "Marge left me," I stammered. It was strange talking to Andora for the first time, especially since she recognized me. "My God, poor thing," she reacted, then asked, "Does this mean we have a childcare problem tonight?" "No, Andora. I just wanted to let you know I'll be watching the kids alone tonight. We've never met, and I thought you should know." "Not so much. Rachel talks about you all the time. She treats you like a surrogate father and has a picture of you next to her bed." "Oh my God. Where did she get that?" "Orderly gave it to her, I guess." "Do you want me to take the day off and take the girls?" No, I just wanted you to know. I'm fine looking after Rachel." "I'm sure Rachel couldn't be in better hands, Peter," she said, taking my hand. "I'll come and get Rachel in the morning." "No, you need to get some sleep. Maybe stop by tomorrow so we can discuss the future. If you want, I can bring Rachel home." "Oh yes, the future," Andora replied, looking concerned. "Don't worry, we can work something out. The girls have plenty of ideas." I smiled. Andora seemed relieved. "Thank you. Yes, I guess that's the way it is. I'll see you tomorrow night. Don't worry about Rachel. She's wonderful." Andora kissed the girls goodnight and told them to behave. When we pulled up to the house, an unfamiliar car was parked in the driveway. Marge got out as I pulled to the curb. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for hours," Marge demanded before curtly informing us she was leaving. Despite the earlier bombshell, her behavior was unrecognizable to me. "If that's who I think it is, tell him to move his car before I do it for him," I snapped, annoyed that she had her new guy there. Marge gestured, and the Jaguar roared to life, moving across the street. Ignoring her, I reversed into the spot where the Jaguar had been. Marge complained I almost hit her. "Oh, you're still here? I thought you left," I lied and headed to the front door. "Aren't you taking your car?" I asked, noting her Nissan was empty while the Jaguar was packed. "No point. Sell it. We're flying out on Wednesday," she replied. "Where do I send the divorce papers?" I thought, but she preempted me. "Ronnie's lawyer's address is on the kitchen table," she said curtly, then spoke to Orderly and Rachel. I didn't wait to hear the conversation and went inside with the girls following. They high-fived each other, but I ignored it. We watched TV for a while, then I sent the girls to bed. They went without argument, which was a first for Orderly. I had a couple of whiskeys to help me sleep. Sunday morning, I woke to the smell of frying bacon. For a moment, I forgot Marge had left and thought she was making breakfast. Then I remembered the previous day. The room seemed different. All signs of Marge were gone. Even her parents' pictures were missing. I went to the bathroom, and her personal items were also gone. It seemed someone had cleaned up while I slept. "Come on, Dad. Breakfast is getting cold," Orderly called from the stairs. In the kitchen, the girls insisted I sit while they served breakfast. Fries, orange juice, and coffee, like a hotel. They had cornflakes, juice, and tea. I complimented their cooking, and they beamed. Carol, Frank, and their kids arrived before we finished. The calm was broken, but the girls quickly served coffee to Carol and Frank. It took some coaxing to get the girls to leave the dishwashing and go play with Carol's kids. Carol busied herself with the dishes while Frank and I had coffee, and I recounted the events of the previous day. They assured me they'd help however they could. Frank recommended a good divorce lawyer. Carol made dinner with what was in the fridge, and I spent most of the day tending to my roses, occasionally chatting with them. Rachel and Orderly helped me with the roses in the afternoon, and Rachel quoted a line from the song, "It's been a good year for the roses," which struck a chord with me given the situation. Around 4:30, a cab pulled up. Andorra arrived. The girls let her in, and we got acquainted. Carol, Andorra, and I discussed the girls' babysitting plan. Andorra confirmed she'd be working a Sunday night shift, earning more than at her current job. We agreed to the plan with minor adjustments and Carol's occasional help during school vacations. Andorra called her boss to confirm the extra shift and got an immediate yes. She looked to me for confirmation, and I nodded. We realized Rachel needed school clothes for the next day, so Carol drove Andorra and Rachel home to pick them up, with Orderly insisting on going too. As I carried Rachel's bag inside, I asked Andorra if she drove. "Yeah, but since Tony left, I can't afford a car," she replied. "How about using the Micra?" I asked, pointing to Marge's car. "I can't," she said. "Why not? She told me to get rid of it. You'll need it to drive Orderly to and from school." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, let's call the insurance company and add you as a driver," I insisted. "We'll deal with Marge's insurance separately." "His name is Ronald, Dad," Orderly corrected me. "Who cares? He's Ronald the Rat to me," I replied sharply. "But he's funny and cute," she insisted, referring to a puppet character from TV. I relented with a smile. "Okay, Ronald the Rat." Over the next few weeks, we adapted to the new routine. Carol and Frank often visited on Saturdays, checking the pantry and sometimes cooking lunch. Although housework wasn't my strength, I managed to keep things in order, and Carol never complained. Weekdays were lonely, but I adjusted. Fridays were a highlight when I came home to Andorra and the girls. Andorra often cooked for us before her Friday night shift. The hardest times were coming home to an empty house and waking up alone, dealing with the resentment toward Marge. After years of marriage, waking up alone every morning took some getting used to. There were complications with the divorce. Marge and her new man had left the country, traveling extensively, making it hard for her attorney to reach her. I learned that his ex-wife was demanding child support and had blocked his UK accounts. I helped by informing her attorney of Marge's whereabouts whenever she called Orderly. Credit goes to Orderly for prying out that information and passing it on to me. Whether Orderly knew why I needed the information, I'm unsure. The difficulties Marge's attorney faced worked in my favor. At a court hearing, Marge's solicitor asked for another adjournment, claiming he was waiting to hear from her. The judge, frustrated, asked if I knew where Marge was. "I'm sorry, sir," I replied, standing up. "I haven't spoken to my wife since she left us." I didn't mention Marge's calls to Orderly every 3 weeks because the judge didn't ask about that. The judge noted Marge's unreasonable behavior for not communicating with her attorney and suggested I had grounds for desertion. He granted my divorce and gave me full custody of Orderly. "I don't see how joint custody can work if Mrs. Thomas can't communicate with her attorney," he said. "Mr. Thomas, I grant you full custody and terminate Mrs. Thomas's parental rights with one condition." He told Marge's attorney to inform her she had 21 days to appear in court if she wished to contest. The judge then addressed me again. "It surprises me you haven't demanded child support from your wife." "Frankly, Your Honor, I don't see much chance of collecting it unless Marjorie returns to the country," I replied. The judge ordered a nominal £100 monthly support, doubting I would ever receive it but setting a precedent. He advised my legal representatives to verify any assets Marge might have in the UK. I walked out of court as a single man with full custody of Orderly and rights to any property Marge had in the country. I never bothered to look for it. On Monday, I noticed an international call on the log from the day before, likely from Marjorie. Neither Orderly nor Rachel mentioned the call or Marjorie's location, which was unusual. I figured it out but didn't dwell on it, focusing instead on our new routine. As time went on, Marjorie's calls to Orderly became less frequent. I wasn't surprised. They were one-sided, aside from Orderly's subtle inquiries about Marjorie's location, which ceased once her boyfriend's divorce was settled. Somehow, Orderly and Rachel knew about it, likely through school connections. The divorce was finalized about 4 months ago. One Saturday, while at a movie and having burgers, Rachel announced she and her mother would move soon due to a rent increase. I didn't realize this was part of a larger plan. It turned out the girls had plotted to have Andorra and Rachel move in with us. At dinner one Friday, Orderly casually asked Andorra if she found an apartment yet. Rachel then exaggerated horror stories about their search. Orderly suggested, "We have a spare room. Why don't Rachel and Aunt Andorra move in with us?" I thought Orderly's idea made sense, saving Andorra from rent and reducing our running around. I looked to Andorra for her thoughts, but she avoided eye contact. I didn't want to reject the idea outright or put Andorra in an awkward spot, so I tried to be cautious. "Well, sometimes people might get the wrong idea about a man and woman living together," I said. Andorra laughed. "Geez, Pete, you sound like a prude." "I was just thinking of your reputation." "My reputation? You're kidding me. I already face rumors at my apartment because I'm away every weekend and drive a new car. People think I'm doing something else." "You're kidding," I said. "No, they even wrote to my landlord. I told them I work at a cab company, but the rumors persist. You need to get out of there." "I know, but finding an affordable apartment is tough." "What about Orderly's idea? There's plenty of room." "Yeah, you're right. Without the girls, this place is like a morgue. And you're not a bad cook." "Should I take that as a compliment?" "Yes. The room is yours if you want it, Andorra. The girls seem excited." "We'll need to discuss rent," suggested Andorra. "No need. I don't like housekeeping, and you're a better cook. Maybe you'll handle cooking here." "I'd pay for utilities and housekeeping," Andorra insisted. "We'll discuss that later. Are you sure you want to move in?" "If you're inviting us, then yes, we'd love to." "Then it's settled. When do you want to move in?" "Well, our apartment is furnished. Don't worry. Most of my things can be thrown away. I sold the good stuff years ago after Tony left when I needed money." So, we agreed. Andorra and Rachel moved in with Orderly and me. "What happened?" I asked Andorra, but her look told me she'd explain later when the kids weren't around. I knew her husband had died in a traffic accident years ago, but didn't know the details. Later, while walking Andorra to the car, I heard a distinct smack and saw Orderly and Rachel looking innocent. Andorra and Rachel moved in the following week. Most of Andorra's furniture was discarded, but some items made it into the house, with others stored in the garage. Her TV and music center ended up in the girls' room. The house felt like a home again, and my mood improved noticeably. I stopped going for after-work drinks because I had bedtime stories to read to my 2 daughters. My traveling days ended when Marge left. My boss started sending others on trips, and I stayed home. Shortly after Andorra moved in, I began to fall for her, though I tried to hide it. Andorra, a year younger than me, always looked immaculate and had a great sense of humor. She never resented the girls or me, and even tolerated my quirks. I realized I loved her from the moment I met her. Carol noticed first. That Christmas, while setting the table with Carol, she asked, "Have you told Andorra yet?" "Told her what?" "That you're in love with her, you fool," Carol said. "Don't be silly, Carol. Pete, I can read you like a book. You're more hooked on Andorra than you were on Stephanie Mathers." Stephanie Mathers was my high school crush who broke my heart. Carol and her friends had helped me forget her. "I'm attached to Andorra, but I don't want to upset the balance," I said. "Peter, she likes you as much as you like her. You two act like school kids in love." "What do you mean?" "You both avoid touching each other. Either you hate each other, which I doubt, or you're in love." "So you think Andorra likes me?" "Yes, Pete. She's as smitten as you are. Even the girls see it." "What should I do?" "Tell her how you feel. You've charmed women before." "Marge was different." "You never liked Marge, did you?" "No, I didn't trust her. She had you wrapped around her finger. But those 2 little girls love you, which I never thought Marge did." "Marge loved me when we married." "Think what you want, Pete. Now, there's a woman in the kitchen who loves you. Find a way to melt the ice." Just as our conversation started, Andorra walked in to check on dinner preparations, forcing Carol and me to change the subject. During dinner, Carol kept giving me meaningful looks and shared a private joke with Orderly and Rachel. Over the next few days, I nearly brought up Andorra several times, but always hesitated. On New Year's Eve, Andorra was working, and Carol and Frank took the girls so I could go to a party with office friends. Reluctantly, I agreed. Around 4 a.m., the party wound down. I called a cab. Andorra answered. "Hey, gorgeous, can you send one of the guys to take me home?" I slurred. "Are you mad, Pete?" Andorra replied. "I had a hard time deciding which phone to call," I joked. "Try not to throw up in the car," she warned, laughing. Phil, the driver, arrived and helped me into the cab. As we drove, I realized we weren't heading to my house. "You're going the wrong way," I muttered. "You need someone to put you to bed, and it won't be me." "I think I know who will volunteer," Phil replied. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Phil and Dora were helping me out of the car. Andorra clung to my arm, helping me to the door. Phil helped me upstairs, and then Andorra began loosening my clothes to make me comfortable. Intoxicated, I saw this as the perfect opportunity. Andorra leaned over me, and I muttered, "You know, you're one hell of an attractive little Andorra." "What does that mean?" she asked. That you're good enough to eat and I'm hungry, I slurred with a smirk. How much have you had to drink? She asked. Not enough. Jesus, Pete, you're as drunk as a newt. Yeah, but if I drank a little more, I'd have the courage to tell you how much I love you, I confessed. I'll believe it when you can tell me sober. Now get some sleep and we'll see how you feel in the morning, Andorra said, smiling. She stood to leave, but I grabbed her arm, pulling her gently onto the bed beside me. She didn't try to get up, and I soon dozed off. The next morning, sunlight pouring in worsened my hangover. Disappointed, I found Andorra was no longer beside me. I tried to lift my head and groaned in pain. Here, have a drink, I heard Andorra's voice behind me. What is it? I asked, shielding my eyes from the sunlight. It can't be poison until you marry me. I need life insurance on you first, she joked. How do you know I won't bump you off first? I replied, trying to be witty. You can't. You have 2 daughters to look after, she said with a smirk. One of them is yours, I reminded her. They think of themselves as sisters and see you as their father, she noted. And you're like Orderly's mother now. She's called me Mom several times recently, I added. I hadn't noticed, she said, sounding surprised. And Rachel's been calling you Daddy for a month now, I informed her. Really? Did she? She asked, astonished. Yes, even Carol and Frank noticed, I confirmed. Did you discuss it with Carol on Boxing Day? She inquired. I discussed a lot with Carol, I replied. Is she already planning her wedding outfit? I joked, despite my hangover. Andorra sat holding the drink she prepared for me, looking confused. So, are you going to marry me or not? I asked, breaking the silence. You didn't ask me, she pointed out. I wanted to know your answer before I asked. It's less embarrassing if I get rejected, I explained. Well, you wouldn't look foolish if you asked, she replied thoughtfully. But, I prompted, but I have a confession. I'm not a widow. Tony's not dead. Legally, I was never married to him, she revealed. I'm confused, I admitted. Tony was a bigamist. He was already married when he married me, so our marriage is null and void, she explained. Wow, so you're not a widow and never married? I clarified. Yes, it's easier to tell everyone I'm a widow, she admitted. In that case, would you do me the honor of, I started, but we got distracted and spent the next hour kissing and hugging, almost forgetting my headache. By the time Frank brought the girls home at 3 p.m., Andor and I were in the kitchen, planning how to tell the girls. They seemed to understand immediately, likely because Andor was almost sitting on my lap. They hugged us both, and when Frank entered, he said, Congratulations. When? We set a date for mid-February and planned a modest celebration, though the girls wanted something more extravagant. We settled on an average-sized event with the wedding at the registry office and a small reception afterward. Neither of us had many living relatives, and the registry office avoided the complications of public announcements, keeping things simple for Andor, who was supposed to be a widow. After Frank went home, Andor had the delicate task of submitting her resignation to the taxi company's supervisor. She wouldn't work night shifts due to personal preferences, which irritated me because I disliked sleeping alone. We decided to sleep in separate bedrooms until the wedding to set a good example for the girls regarding extramarital lovemaking. Still, I developed the habit of coming home for long lunches once the girls were back in school, improving my mood significantly. The following weekend, Andor worked her last shifts at the taxi depot, bringing home numerous flowers and chocolates from her colleagues. That Sunday night, several drivers and their wives invited us for dinner and fun at a local pub, making cabs scarce in town. The wedding arrived quickly and went smoothly. Our girls were perfect bridesmaids, and Andor looked stunning. We spent one night in the honeymoon suite at the luxury hotel where we held the reception, while Frank and Carol took the girls home. Our plan was to spend most of the school summer vacation traveling with the girls. That first year, we spent 5 weeks driving around Florida, the Caribbean, and Southern California, seeing and experiencing as much as possible. A week or two after the wedding, I noticed something was wrong when I got home from work. The girls were happy, but Andor seemed upset. After the girls went to bed, she told me what was bothering her. Does Rachel know Tony isn't dead? Andor asked. How did she know? I was shocked since we had never discussed it around the girls. Andor explained that the girls often hid pictures of Marjorie and Tony in their drawers. When asked why, Rachel said, They don't need us. We don't want to look at their pictures. Rachel knew her father had not died in a traffic accident, but had run away, though she didn't know why. Andor decided not to explain further to avoid telling Rachel she was technically illegitimate. Surprisingly, Rachel didn't seem bothered by the truth, which I thought helped the girls feel closer. Andor turned out to be an amazing wife and mother. She was patient with the kids and me, even when things got hectic at the office. Despite my flaws, Andor never mentioned them and had a wonderful sense of humor, often teasing me playfully. Our nights, though sometimes tiring, were filled with love and laughter. By early summer, Marjorie's calls to Orderly had almost stopped. Orderly, angry at her mother, became more persistent when Marjorie did call. Andor and I had to reprimand her for calling Andor new mommy during these conversations. Orderly then switched tactics, talking about our family activities and referring to Andor as Daddy's wife, and Rachel as my sister. We discussed Orderly's behavior, but realized we couldn't list all the words and phrases to forbid. Marjorie had to deal with the consequences of her actions. Before our vacation ended, Orderly and Rachel started asking if we were really their mom and dad. They left printouts about adoption procedures around the house, hinting at Andor adopting Orderly, and me adopting Rachel. They even found forms for changing Rachel's name to Thomas. After discussing, Andor and I decided to pursue both adoptions. Rachel's father, though absent, still had legal rights. Our attorney for my divorce case handled the process. It took over a year, but we eventually terminated Tony's parental rights and completed the adoptions. Coincidentally, the same judge for my divorce case presided over Tony's termination. Legally, we became Mr. and Mrs. Thomas with our daughters Orderly and Rachel. We considered having more children, but decided against it. After our marriage, I got a promotion, which included a bigger salary and more delegation. Our summer trips became regular, making up for my lack of travel earlier in life. In our second year, we spent 5 weeks in Europe, the third year in India and Sri Lanka, and the fourth in Australia and New Zealand. By the fifth summer, Orderly and Rachel, both 14, documented our travels with video cameras. We planned a trip to Canada, the northern U.S., and Alaska, with the girls making detailed plans. About 2 years after our marriage, Marjorie started sending us Christmas cards, though we couldn't reciprocate because they lacked a return address. The cards had Canadian stamps, suggesting Marjorie and Ronald had settled there. Marjorie was rarely mentioned, and she hadn't called Orderly in years, so no one brought it up. As usual, our master plan for the extended summer vacation changed when the girls pointed out we couldn't visit all the desired locations within the given time, even after significant cuts. We decided to split our trip, focusing on the West that summer and saving the East for another year. We arrived in Winnipeg on an Air Canada flight in late June, spending a day or two exploring the city's historic sites. From Manitoba, we drove west to Saskatchewan, then south through the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas, before turning west and north again through Colorado and Wyoming, where we stayed at a dude ranch. While the horses were pleasant to ride, I preferred English saddles over the Western ones, feeling less confident about getting out of them if something went wrong. There are 2 theories about riding horses or motorcycles: stay with it and hope to regain control, or back off and hope to fall safely. The idea of being on a horse or motorcycle with a spinning rear wheel has never appealed to me. We eventually entered Montana and stopped in a town I'd always wanted to visit, likely read about in some Western. After checking into a motel, we headed to a nearby diner. The diner was crowded and noisy, but suddenly there was a loud crash followed by silence as a waitress dropped a tray of food. Andor and I, like everyone else, turned to see who had dropped the tray. To my surprise, I recognized the culprit. She also recognized me, likely causing her to drop the tray. The poor woman stood there, stunned, staring straight at me. Andor recognized her too, and we both reacted by saying almost the same thing in unison to our girls. "Eat your dinner, Rachel, Orderly. There's nothing to worry about," Andor and I reassured the girls, each addressing our own adopted daughter. Despite adopting each other's children 5 years ago, we still tended to scold our own first. Both girls were trying to catch a glimpse of the commotion's cause. Orderly quickly recognized the woman, muttered, "So be it," and returned to her meal. Rachel stared a bit longer, then looked at me, smiled, glanced at her mother, and resumed eating like Orderly. The other diners, realizing the incident was related to us, stared, but we ignored them and continued our meal. "I guess the grass wasn't as green as it looked," Andor whispered as we headed to the car with the girls. "What do you mean?" I asked a bit curtly. "If she's working here, she's likely no longer with Ronald. One of them probably cheated," Andor explained. "Once a cheater, always a cheater. But she didn't cheat on you. She dumped you and Orderly. Leaving her daughter is like cheating." "Either she couldn't stay faithful or he couldn't," I replied. "Does it matter?" Andor asked. "Only if she tries to cause trouble now. Orderly's been through enough, I said firmly. It's too late for her to cause trouble. Orderly handled it better than you did. After all, the girls— Andor began. Don't say that, Andor. I know what the girls did, and I'm glad we have such clever little manipulators. I just wonder how far their plans go, I interrupted. What do you mean? Andor asked, looking puzzled. Nothing major, just that they seem to be working to a plan. Sometimes I wonder how far in advance they planned everything, I mused. Don't worry. I'm very pleased with how things are. I'm just curious sometimes, Andor said reassuringly. We reached the car and I unlocked the doors with the remote. The kids jumped into the back seats. I opened the front door for Andorra, but she didn't get in. Instead, she came up to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. The girls in the back murmured and shouted approvingly, making comments like "not in public" and "wait until you're in your room." Despite their playful remarks, both were mature for their age due to their difficult pasts. Andorra's husband died when Rachel was 6, and Orderly's mother left us when she was 8. Andor suddenly interrupted the kiss. "We have an audience," she whispered, looking over my shoulder. I saw Marjorie standing in the kitchen doorway watching us. "Do you think Orderly should?" Andor suggested. "Yeah, I don't think we have a choice," I replied. I knew I would have to confront Marjorie later and arrange for Orderly to meet her mother alone. Andor leaned against the car and spoke while I was still pondering. "Your mom is there. I think you should go see her," Andor told Orderly. "Do I have to?" Orderly replied. "She is your mother. You might regret missing this opportunity years from now." Orderly shrugged and reluctantly climbed out of the car. "I don't want to see her. Maybe Rachel will ride with me." "No, we'll be right here," assured Andor. Orderly, with reluctance and a few glances back at us, walked toward her mother, stopping about 10 feet away. Marjorie said something we couldn't hear and took a step forward, but Orderly immediately stepped back. It was frustrating not hearing their conversation, although it seemed Orderly did most of the talking. If Marjorie moved closer, Orderly retreated. "That's not good," muttered Andor. "Apparently so," I replied. Orderly soon turned and ran back to the car, jumped in, slammed the door, and fastened her seatbelt. Marjorie had disappeared from the doorway. I wanted to leave, but Andorra had other plans and was halfway to the door before Orderly finished fastening her seatbelt. I waited for about 10 minutes until Andorra returned. I gave her a questioning look as she got in the car. She glanced at the girls in the back seat and gave me a look that said, "Shut up and drive. We'll discuss this later." After lunch, we planned to stroll along the river path and see the waterfalls that the town was named after. We thought the hydroelectric dams had diminished their original splendor, but they were still impressive. As usual on these walks, Andorra and I never overdo hiking if we can avoid it. 2 girls went ahead, giving Andorra and me a chance to talk. "So, what did she say?" "He left. Dumped her 2 years ago for some waitress in this town, just as we suspected. But I wonder why she didn't go back to the UK. He left her with the motel bill. The motel needed help in the restaurant, so she stayed to work off the bill. She's sharing a room with another woman. They both work in the restaurant during the day and serve drinks at the bar at night." "Sounds like fun. What else is she supposed to do, Pete? Gets herself laid every night by some barfly, I suppose." "No need to be nasty, Peter. Marjorie made a mistake, and now she's paying for it. Anyway, you'll meet her when she finishes work at the restaurant at 6 o'clock. She only has a couple of hours before her bar shift, so you can chat while I take the kids out for a bite." "Andorra, what the hell am I supposed to tell her?" I asked, exasperated. "You need to finish, Peter. No matter what you believe, you need to sit down and talk to her. Remember, she's Orderly's mother. Do you wish she remembered that Marjorie said the same thing?" Andorra advised, her tone calm but firm. "Peter, she regrets her actions and wants to apologize to Orderly and you. But I don't think Orderly is ready to accept that yet. That was clear at lunch. But in time, I'm sure she will. We just have to make sure we don't lose her again," Andorra continued, her voice gentle. "Are you being magnanimous about all this, considering what Tony did to you?" I asked, skeptical. "Pete, is there any point in going through life with hate? What Tony did to me is worse than what Marjorie did to you or Orderly. For a while, I hated him and the other women he tricked into marrying him. Then one day, we were all sitting in the waiting room at the police station, and I realized we were all in the same boat. We had all been tricked and were not to blame. So we became friends. Tony, what's the point of cursing the idiot? If he shows up, I'll report him to the police, but I'm not wasting time hating him. I have more important people to worry about, Andorra said with conviction, pulling me to her and kissing my cheek. Besides, think about it. If Marjorie hadn't run off with that what's-his-name, where would we be now? She added. Good idea, Andorra, I conceded. I know, my love, we'd better hurry. It's 4 o'clock now, she said, glancing at the time. I was waiting in the restaurant parking lot when Marjorie came off duty. She came out with another, very dark-haired woman who scrutinized me before going her way. Marjorie looked nervous, not like the confident woman I last saw in the kitchen laying down the law all those years ago. She still looked quite attractive, though. Hi, Peter, thanks for coming. Marjorie greeted me, her voice tentative. The bar must be quiet now. Why don't we go there and talk? I didn't respond, but gestured for her to take the lead. I followed Marjorie to a booth at the back of the bar. It was obvious we were expected. I noticed the dark-haired woman behind the bar talking to the bartender as we entered. All the booths next to ours were empty. The dark-haired woman walked over and set 2 beers on the table, then said something to Marjorie in Spanish. Marjorie nodded in response. I assumed she had picked up the language during her time here. You wanted to see me, Marjorie? I said, reminding her that I hadn't asked for this meeting. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Peter, she finally whispered. I just now caught her words. No, you've done me a great favor, I replied. Come on, I'm not cut out to be a bloodthirsty diplomat. Yes, Andorra got the better end of the deal, Marjorie said bitterly. I should have realized she'd latch onto you as soon as I left, she replied bitterly. It was the other way around, Marjorie. As soon as I laid eyes on Andorra. I wasn't quite sure how to end that sentence. Maybe I thought if I had met Andorra before Marjorie left, I might have been the one to walk away. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, but I doubt I would have done that. I'm too bound by duty and other things to act so selfishly. Sometimes you wonder if this is a failure. What happened to Loverboy, after all? I asked Marjorie. And where did that creep get all his money? You know, he left his wife and kids without a penny, so she seized all his bank accounts. Ronald's money? What a joke. You mean everyone else's money? He was a crook, Peter. He's wanted everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why he left me. In the end, I helped him with some scams, and we had to leave Argentina quickly when my picture was in the local papers. I think he crossed into Canada when he found out the FBI was looking for him at the motel, coincidentally with one of the waitresses from the diner. Ironically, I'm now doing the job of that waitress. Wasn't the FBI after you? I asked. Pretty much, yes, Marjorie replied. But I made a deal with them. If I'm willing to testify against Ronald when they catch him, they agreed not to throw the book at me. In return, I got a slap on the wrist, 2 years probation for aiding a fugitive. I'm stuck in the country until they find him and have to report to the authorities every week. But it doesn't interfere much because Buster, the deputy sheriff I report to, is here or at the diner most of the time. Are you still in debt? I inquired. I was drowning in it. I signed over almost everything, including Ronald's rental car, and the woman drove off in it. I've nearly paid it all off, but there's still a few $1,000s left, she admitted. No, Pete, I can't, Marjorie protested as she saw me pull out my checkbook. For once in your life, do as you're told, Marjorie, I said sternly. Okay, I'll write this for £5,000, about $10,000. That should get you out of debt and give you something to lean on if you need it. If you decide to return to the UK when they catch him, we'll help you find a place and get settled. But don't think this gives you the right to interfere with our family. You know the courts have stripped you of all parental rights to orderly, don't you? She made that clear to me this morning, Marjorie confirmed. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not why we sent her, I explained. I realized that when Andor walked into the kitchen. Pete, I was stupid. I never meant to hurt you and orderly like that. I got swept up in Ronald's exciting stories. It wasn't worth it, she confessed. I assure you, Marjorie, that was a long time ago. I'm just glad you're safe. But Orderly and I have a new life now, and you are no longer a part of it. Andor and I will try to ensure Orderly keeps in touch with you, I said firmly. That's more than I deserve, Peter, and I really don't deserve this check, Marjorie said, shaking her head. Well, you'd better take it. It will ease my conscience a bit. When we leave tomorrow morning, we'll come to the diner for breakfast. Perhaps we can get Orderly to speak to you civilly once more, I suggested. I don't deserve your kindness, Peter, she repeated, her voice wavering. No, Marjorie. I had to make my point, even if I tried to convince myself otherwise. But you're Orderly's mother, and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get back to my family, I said, standing up. Sure. I'm sorry, Pete, she said softly. I got up and walked away without looking back. When I found the girls, they were all waiting for me breathlessly. I took Andor aside and briefly told her about my conversation with Marjorie and the money I gave her. "She doesn't deserve you," was Andor's only comment when I mentioned the check. "That's pretty much what she said," I replied, kissing my wife. "But you want to thank you?" was all she replied to the remark. Later, I contacted Orderly alone and was about to start the "you only have one birth mother" routine when she informed me that Andorra and Rachel had already arrived. From that point on, the conversation didn't go as I had planned. Orderly said she would talk to her mother the next morning and would try to keep her mouth shut. She added that she wouldn't be alone with her mother and that Rachel or I would have to be present. When I asked why, she curtly replied that one of us was always present during the funeral. I didn't know how to respond, so I left it at that. The next morning, Marjorie, Orderly, and Rachel sat at a nearby table and talked for a long time. I can only assume Marjorie's friends were covering for her because I'm sure she had work to do. The only part of the conversation Andorra and I overheard was two kids raving about how well the roses were growing in the garden at their house. All three of them smiled most of the time. As we drove away, Marjorie walked to the car and kissed both girls goodbye. She then turned to Andor and me. "These two are very lucky. They have found themselves the best mom and dad in the world." She said this somewhat unexpectedly, taking me by surprise, then turned and ran back into the restaurant. I guess she cried on the run. I kissed my wife. Then we got in the car and drove north to the Calgary border. From the way the kids were looking in the rearview mirror, I don't think they were looking back or particularly concerned that we had left this town behind. After we returned home that year, Marjorie kept in touch with her. Andor made a habit of writing to her fairly regularly. We never found out if the FBI had tracked Ronald down, but less than a year later, we learned that Marjorie was going to marry her deputy sheriff, or whatever his name was. We had a family gathering, and after much heartache, it was decided that we would decline the invitation to Marjorie's wedding. However, I managed to slip in there alone for a few days to attend. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I felt I had to do it. Buster, or Buddy, as everyone called him, turned out to be a really nice guy. Once I got to know him better, he even picked me up at the airport and introduced me to all his friends and family. I learned from Buddy that Marjorie had been very frank and open with him from the beginning. She admitted to everything she had done and told him how much she regretted her past actions. It turned out that Buddy had arranged with several of his trucker buddies to send her Christmas cards, etc., to us from various cities in Canada. I believe Marjorie was trying to hide from us the true circumstances she was in. It's a little weird to give your ex-wife away at her wedding, but I guess some idiot had to do the job. Maybe that's why I went, to kind of put a stop to the whole thing. I don't believe Orderly and Rachel figured out where I'd gone for those 5 days, but they could have. Those two were always one step ahead of me in just about everything. To be honest, they and Andorra still are. Over the next few years, we received news that Marjorie had given birth to 2 boys. We never saw them, though, except in pictures. Now that they are a little older, I believe the boys have fairly regular contact with Orderly and Rachel, but neither of my daughters mentions them or Marjorie to me. Very often, Orderly and Rachel ended up marrying 2 brothers. Sometimes I feel really sorry for these poor girls. The girls are still incredibly close to each other and definitely play a major role in these marriages. When our 2 girls are scheming together, it takes a man to come out on top. I don't think I've ever been able to do that. They both have 2 children, and suspiciously from my point of view, in both cases, the girls were born remarkably close to each other, both in date and physically. Andorra and I have enjoyed watching our grandchildren grow up and become very much like their mothers. I retired as managing director last year, and Andor and I are now enjoying an 8-month round-the-world trip. We've been pondering whether we'll find somewhere we'll want to settle down, but to be honest, I think our daughters and their families will pull us home to the UK again. We haven't sold the house. The girls wouldn't let us because of the roses. God knows how much time they spend there attending to it all, but we get regular reports. Just this morning, while checking the mail, I got a picture of my garden from them titled, "It's been a good year for roses. Life goes on. That's it."